seen this clip from the first...
Even when you consider all...
Fandom is
Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Reactor for today, October 16th, 2020. Hello, everybody. I am your intrepid host, Tristan Johnson, and I stream on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. On Mondays, I do the Monday Discourse, which is a stream I do with Mia Mulder, where we talk about shit that's going on the internet. Then, on Tuesdays, I now have an announcement that this stream is going to get shortened because of burnout situations that keep happening. So Step Back Tonight is going to be a show I do Tuesdays that run from 7 to 9. And then the Reactor, which you're watching right now, which goes from 2 to 5 on Fridays. I go by and also, yeah, the Reactor is a stream where people send me clips to look at and we watch them together, and it's real fun. I'm looking at the kind of lineup we got here, and we've got Roman soldiers, Disney songs, Egypt, Star Trek, dogs, Scotland, alternate history hub stuff, all sorts of fun shit. So we'll see where this all goes. Yeah, so the Reactor, people send me links and I react like a person. Well, Simpsons called Bernie supporters goons. I know. Fucking I followed and unfollowed Al Jean on Twitter in like the first week of yeah. Can we start with Sam Cedar yelling at a libertarian? Let's see if it's on the list. I don't like... Oh, god damn it. I just did all this work to set up a thing. Alright, let's see. Anyways. I followed and unfollowed Al Jean, and in the same week because of that clip. Fuck that guy. I liked his book. I liked Springfield Confidential, and The Simpsons is great, informative, and now it's just like bland centrist trash. So that makes me unhappy. Anyways, I go by he, him pronouns. My work can be found at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. And if you're on Twitch right now, if you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch subscription every month. And if you use that subscription to help out an independent Twitch creator at no extra cost to you, you get to help somebody out with... what's it called? You get to help somebody who's trying to make this whole thing work. And if you choose Step Back History, I'll be very happy because, you know, rent and cats and things like that. Yeah, and if you don't use it, Amazon just gets to keep your money, so you might as well. And, yeah, latest video on Tristan Won't Shut Up. You have my latest little video. It's on a wonderful... thing. It's a video on the trolling industrial complex, and it seems to be doing pretty well, so please check it out. People will like it, or hopefully you'd like it. And yeah, my latest video on Step Back is still the Emma Goldman video. The next Step Back video I'm working on right now is sort of about the importance of history and the danger of right-wing grifters like Dinesh D'Souza. And it's a Dinesh D'Souza Part 2, Dinesh D'Souza Endgame. Working... Right now, that video is on pause because I'm a bit ahead of schedule, and I'm working to see if I can get... or I have a sponsor for it, and so I'm trying to get that worked out before I film. Because basically I have everything done getting ready to film, and I'm just waiting for... the sponsors to work things out with me. The next Tristan Won't Shut Up video is going to be about school, and basically about why capitalism is bad. It's bad for schools, and what a school that was not based on capitalist principles might actually look like. So, take a look at that. I've also got some other projects in the works. I'm working on a pretty... I'm working on a Cold War script right now that I'm, like, very... what's it called? Why'd you call your Dinesh D'Souza takedown videos Infinity War and now Endgame? Because, what's it called? Dinesh D'Souza, the first one, Dinesh D'Souza gets the Infinity Stones and he uses them to rewrite history. I don't know. I thought it was a funny concept, like 6 months ago when I first thought of it. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, so my next video will be that, but then I've got some fun. The general premise of the next video, like the general plot, is that because all of the history YouTubers, except for me, have been erased from history because they disagree with what's it called? With Dinesh D'Souza's concept of the past. I have to, and I've only been spared because my channel is irrelevant. It was so irrelevant that it flew under the radar of Dinesh D'Souza's Snap. So instead I have to turn to an alternate history YouTuber to send a message back to try and save the timeline. That's sort of my that's my plan. Yeah, so that's gonna be that's a really weird thing I'm doing. Other than that, what else is there to say except you're welcome? No. I hate caving to peer pressure. Aren't a lot of history YouTubers right-wing? Are they still alive in this timeline? Okay, yeah, sure. I'll go for it. A lot of... I'm trying to think of like a... There's not a ton of... I guess there are right-wing history YouTubers. There's quite a bit. Anyways. That's the project I'm working on. I'm pretty excited for it. Not going to lie. Then when it's done... Then I have ideas for what I'm doing in November. I had an idea. I was thinking of doing a Black Death video, and then I realized that I don't think that video would actually do very well with my audience. So I did a whole bunch of number crunching to see what my audience actually finds interesting. And so I can tentatively announce this is subject to a lot of change because, you know, the internet. But I'm thinking that the next Step Back video after Dinesh D'Souza Endgame is probably going to be about the militia movement. Yeah. So that'll be the next thing. Okay. Besides that, somebody is being very, very thorn in the side that I have to look at his video or else he will have extreme stomach problems or something. So I guess we're going to watch a video about Sam Cedar arguing with a libertarian. Alright, let's get this thing. One second. Gotta like arrange my tabs because I had all my tabs lined up. So it was all nice and perfectly balanced as all things should be. Has Tristan collabed with the Alternate History Hub before? Yes, I have. I did a video back at the end of 2017 or 2018. I did a collaboration about I participated in a video about what would the world be like if there was no internet for the Alternate History Hub, and I talked about net neutrality and systems theory on Step Back. It's not exactly the greatest video I've done, but it's on there. Okay, so let's watch stuff. So let's turn the music off. And here we go.
Calling from an 864 area code. Who's this? I got maybe one or two more calls to go. 864. 864 once. 864 twice. Go on. Next one. Calling from 501 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Mr. Cedar. My name is Blake. I'm calling from Arkansas. We spoke before.
Hello, Blake. What's on your mind?
Well, the last topic that you were talking about was pretty interesting to me with the school lunches. Did you guys did they include how many kids were in the Cranston school district, or
no?
I was trying to cross-reference that with the 45,000 in negative balances. What? So you think that they should be funded for free? That was your proposition.
Right. In New York City, for instance, all lunches are free.
Okay. So those are negative balances for people that pay for their lunches and don't get them for free as part of,
I don't
needy
know.
children or family programs or something.
I don't know if those are people who get reduced lunch. I don't know if there are how much, what their standards are for free lunch in that school. It could be people in Cranston who can afford lunch but just haven't sent it in. I don't know. It could be any of those. But I say free lunch for everyone so that there's no stigma associated with getting a free lunch.
This is like one of those things that I'm always on board for because, like, it's sort of that whole thing about universal versus means-tested programs. That mean, and this guy is just about to, like, basically show his whole ass, I'm guessing, about being against this. But, like, universal programs as opposed to means-testing programs are much more stable than... universal programs are much more stable politically. Because if you give everybody something, it becomes much more politically costly to take away than if it's just going to be for a certain amount of people based on means testing. So that means that, lunch for all kids at schools is better than, kids who come from a certain background, who live in a disadvantaged community, who start a business within 3 years or whatever. Results in not only like the issue of where you draw the line is dirty and doesn't really like factor in multiple different contexts and stuff, but on top of that, it means that it's money going from somebody to benefit only another group, which in the realm of electoral politics and representative electoralism and stuff like that makes it politically more, it makes it politically disadvantageous. And as someone mentioned, that you have to set up a whole mechanism for basically making it, you have to set up a whole mechanism for enforcing the means testing, which drives up expenses even more. And it creates a stigma, like how things like food stamp programs create a stigma when, like, a universal food supplement program or food subsidy would be a much smarter idea. Things like that. So let's keep going. Let's see what this guy's got to say.
That's part of school.
Well, the children, are they aware of who gets what and
oh yeah, man. Do you have
in
kids?
The lunch line?
You must have kids, right?
I do.
Okay. So you must know that kids, I don't know how old your kids are, but kids are
She's 5.
Yeah, okay. She is? It's a she?
Yeah.
All right, dude. Speaking as a guy who has a 13-year-old daughter, get prepared for just how mean kids can be. But yes, you get a free lunch and the other kids don't. You're the kid who gets the free lunch. And it gets a lot worse from there in terms of like the way you're stigmatized. Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Okay. So your idea was for everything to be free.
I mean, it's not my idea.
What about,
it's not.
Man, so like, what's it called? Poor kids just went hungry in Israel. That fucking sucks. I mean, like, what's it called? This is also because like American schools, like, basically lock you in the school until like all day, which I found out through Kelly, because like apparently in America, like, they like literally lock the doors of the schools and you're not allowed to leave like for lunch or anything like that. But yeah, it's this is still just not like a. Either way, the state providing like this is like one of the few places where the state can actually intervene in the life of a child in a way that helps them, and so it should be a thing that is used for giving them all sorts of services on top of education. Because, like, we have to stop pretending that school is just a place where you go to get education. It's a place for you to socialize. It's basically the closest thing America has to state-funded daycare. And at the same time, it should be a place where kids can get all of the government services that the government lines up for kids. Like vaccinations and things like this. That sounds like a fire safety hazard. Yeah, I don't know exactly how that works. But like when I said like there was a Harvey's across the street from where Harvey's is, by the way, a Canadian like burger chain. There was a Harvey's across the street from my high school when I was a kid, and on Fridays my friends and I would all go out to Harvey's for lunch, and Kelly was like, "You were allowed to leave your school at lunchtime?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And she just like was like, "What? We would never be allowed to leave." And I remember like when I was like in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade at lunchtime, we would go like a long way away to there was this oh man, this just shows like what like Canada, how much Canada could be different, is that we'd probably go like on our lunch break like over a kilometer away to a bar where we would get a decent lunch. We wouldn't drink, obviously, because it's, you know, we were like, this is like grade 6, 7, 8, so I was like, you know, like 11, 12, 13 years old. But like we were able to just like walk quite far away from the school to go get lunch on our own. So yeah.
Not my idea. I mean, they do it in New York City. It wasn't at my behest, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so parents who decide to pack their children's lunch,
They
would have to,
no,
as a taxpayer, they'd have to fund something that they're not utilizing. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. Do you intend to send your kids to public school?
What is $1 a day or 50 cents a day or
Blake.
$1.50 a day?
Blake, is that your name?
What
Blake?
kind of a message does that send to a child?
Blake?
That a parent wouldn't do that for them.
Blake, hold on.
Yeah.
Do you intend to send your kid to public school?
At this point, yeah.
All right. So you know the dynamic.
Hopefully not long term.
Okay. Hopefully not long term. I mean, because that implies to me that maybe you don't have the either the private school option or you don't have the cash for the private school. Now, when your neighbor,
I'm talking to my niece to try to get a small homeschool.
Okay. Are you trying to get small homeschool? But when your neighbor comes up to you and goes, "Hey, Blake, why are my tax dollars supporting your kid going to school for free?" What are you prepared to say to that person?
They have a problem with their tax dollars supporting my child. I would say to them, I wish we had a different situation where we could get better education through other means rather than forcing everybody.
Yeah, well, Blake, I guess what? Hey,
that
and a quarter gets me a phone call, maybe. What if he says that, your neighbor?
Say that again.
Well, in other words, you can say, "I wish for we had a different world," but that dynamic is the same dynamic you had a problem with in terms of lunch. And, you know, to send the kid to school is a lot more expensive than just the lunch, right?
Like, what's it called? Like, Michel Foucault says that, like, school is a prison, and then Laser Samurai's school, like, literally puts razor wire on their fucking fences. Holy shit. That is, like, what's it called? Michel Foucault would like to enter the chat.
The brown bag.
We were talking about lunches, not the education system in general.
Well, we're talking about lunch in school.
We're trying to tackle these things one at a time.
Yeah, well, Blake, we're talking about lunch in school.
Right.
And I'm talking about a relationship between people in society.
Well, very low effort.
Well, low cost and
very cheap.
Low cost and low effort, maybe from your perspective, but I mean, you know, you don't want to get into a pissing match with somebody who looks at you and goes, wait, it's pretty easy to set up a homeschool thing. Just do it in your 4,500 square foot home, like me.
No, there's a lot of government regulations and red tape and permits and licenses.
Hire somebody to take care of it.
All sorts of stuff you got to get through.
Hire somebody to take care of it. Hire someone full time to take care of it.
If you cared.
I mean, if you cared. But you don't have the money. Right, but for someone who's super wealthy, we'd look at that and go, come on, man.
Don't care about your kid enough.
Don't you care about your kid?
America loves prisons so much, they turn their schools into prisons. Holy shit.
You got a car, right, Blake?
$1 a day is comparable to $10,000 in a year.
Wait. You got a car, don't you, Blake?
Yeah.
What kind of car do you got?
It's a truck.
Okay, a truck. What kind of truck?
A lot of money for that.
What kind of truck? You got a
Chevrolet.
You got a Chevy. A Chevy what?
Mm-hmm. Silverado.
A Silverado. That's a $30,000 truck, isn't it?
No.
How much?
It was $14,000 brand new.
14,000 brand new.
Truck.
It's just a work truck. Okay, so it's just a single cab. Is that your only car, or do you have two vehicles? Where do you take the kids?
No, that's my only one.
Well, you don't take the 5-year-old in that.
Sure do.
You put her in a car seat in that front?
Yep.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so you got a $14,000 truck. Why are you spending all that money on a truck? Why don't you get a used one, dude?
So I just want to pause here to say that there's some people talking in the chat about IQ, and I want to weigh in because this is sort of like a super important conversation, which is that IQ is probably one of the most useless metrics. It's like measuring BMI. Like, it has some utility in, like, the grand scale for, like, understanding broad trends and things. Like, IQ tests were used to basically figure out that removing lead from water improved a lot of people's cognitive ability. But, like, as an individualized thing, that's fucking bullshit. Because, like, there's too many circumstances, there's too many different things. Like, the test design, the what's it called, the social context in which things are made, the what's it called, the whether or not the student had breakfast that morning could have an impact on how well they perform in this situation. So, like, IQ, like, first of all, is like kind of a pointless thing. And as somebody as has been already pointed out in the chat, that the highest thing to indicate IQ performance levels is class, having money, because then your parents have enough time to put you into the preparatory courses and, you know, get ready for all those things. And you get to go to the nicer schools, and you get to have access to all the things that have a child, like, you know, like pre-K and everything like that, to help kids get you move up in the world, like, you know, and if anything, and to say that it's like heritable, I mean, it's heritable in the sense that if your parents have money, then you will also have money to have these things. But yeah, you're going to be going down a spiral that leads to, like, the fucking bell curve, which is, like, one of the most racist ideas, like, going around. Oh, man. So yeah, like, let's not go into eugenics territory. It's not a super use, and also intelligence is a very variable thing. Like, I had to take not an IQ test, but a different type of intelligences test when I was getting tested for ADHD. And that is not the test that they take for IQ tests, because it's not based on quotients, it's a percentile thing. And it's usually done in various different domains, because there's very different ways of measuring cognitive reasoning skills. And even then, that's not really a test of intelligence. Intelligence isn't really a thing that you can measure in, like, a this is good or this is bad sort of way. So, and that test I had to take took me, like, the entire fucking day to do, too. Anyways, that's just my thing. That's where I'm gonna drop. So yeah, before you start bringing out your, like, what's it called, your bell curve stuff, please stop.
Put $10,000 into getting. I mean, this is what
they had rebates on it.
Well, I don't care. They had rebates on it. $10,000 truck is
a good
cheaper.
Purchase.
$10,000 is cheaper than $14,000. You would have $4,000 left. I mean, you see my point here, though, right, Blake?
Sam,
that I could sit here in judgment of the way that you spend your...
We're having this huge, long conversation about, like, you know, all the governmental things, and you're asking me about my truck, and I'm talking about $1 a day for your kid's lunch. Like, you can't do that going out to eat anywhere. You could probably barely manage that at home.
Well,
producing food in bulk.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's why we have school lunches. But
right, and you're making the argument that $1 a day is not feasible. I guess I don't understand. I don't understand where this is coming from, Sam. I mean, if you have children, you're responsible for them on some level, aren't you?
The fact that almost half of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. Like, when it comes to government policy, at this point, you have to basically be operating off the idea that people basically have no money. And even that is being generous, because we're getting to the point where people are going to have, like, a good majority of people are going to have negative money. And so that's why these things become, like, big problems. Plus, like, it's such a petty, it's like the petty, dumb libertarian thing of, like, I refuse to pay any money whatsoever because to do anything that even resembles altruism or sort of collective burden on anything. Even though it makes things cheaper and it makes things easier to make, like, what's it called? Like, cheaper overall to maintain because of, like, the power of, like, economic and economies of scale and stuff. But the fact, like, there's this like absolute horrible, like, what's it called, myopic selfishness that is, like, baked into libertarian ideology. And you kind of saw that shit with the anti-mask movement, where people are like, yeah, people are dying, but, like, I want to go to fucking Shoney's. And it's like, Jesus Christ. Can you not, like, what's it called? You can't just, like, think of somebody else for like 1 second.
Well, dude,
So
don't
why
tell
is
me
a dollar
that
a
when
day-
you're going and spending our tax dollars and sending them to public school. Why don't you homeschool them? Why don't you put them in private school? Why don't
I
you
just
be
told you I'm
responsible,
working on that
Blake,
tonight.
instead of going out and getting a new Silverado because there's supposedly a rebate on it?
You're just going to leech off the taxpayers. And
Yeah,
truck-
and then you're going to say,
My truck is 7 years old.
we're subsidizing you. We're subsidizing your
you're
truck
not.
purchase because we're educating your kids for free, man.
No, you're not.
Yeah,
What? Why are you muddling the conversation here?
I'm not muddling anything.
Well, here's a question.
I've had my truck for over 7 years. Like, are you saying I live luxurious, or
No,
what's your argument?
I'm
when you
just
say
saying
I
that.
paid $14,000
I'm just saying
for
that
a new
you
truck?
are leaning on. Are you a homeowner or do you rent?
Yes,
You're a homeowner.
I'm a homeowner.
Okay.
hmm
Why is it that renters, people who rent, have to subsidize you because of that home mortgage deduction? Why do you get a kickback from the government on your mortgage payments? Why is that?
I don't. It doesn't. It doesn't qualify enough. The extra costs don't offset any deductions that I would get for.
You
paying
don't.
the
You're
interest
not
on my mortgage.
eligible for the home mortgage deduction?
Yes, but it doesn't do any good for me.
What do you mean it doesn't do any good for you?
The offset does not bring down my tax liability enough to offset the cost of the extra filings.
What? Now, why is that? I don't understand that.
Because tax people charge extra money.
Well, I mean, dude, you can do your own taxes.
My mortgage payment is $426 total.
Okay.
Do you drive on the roads?
Well,
Yeah,
of course
sure
he does, but he only drives on private roads that he built.
Right.
Because if I'm riding,
Why are you comparing? Why,
if I'm
why,
riding
why
my
have we
bike
come to this
around,
point in the conversation?
if I'm right, because you're the one who said the person who brown bags their lunch and sends their kid to school with that lunch, why are they subsidizing the $1 a day lunch of the person who doesn't brown bag? And I'm asking you, why is the guy who doesn't own a car subsidizing your roads? Why is the guy who's a renter subsidizing your home ownership? Why is the guy who doesn't
They
have a
only
kid in
pay-
school subsidizing your kid going to school? And we all know the answer, Blake, because that's the way society works. It's the only way society can work.
People take responsibility for their children, right? Is that what we're supposed to do in society?
I would like to think so, yes.
Personal responsibility. I mean, it's not, my neighbor across the other side of the block's responsibility to feed my kid, right?
Wait, is it your neighbor's responsibility to educate your kid?
No, they don't.
Well, don't they pay taxes to go to keep that public school open so that your kid can go? And they don't have a kid?
Yeah, and somebody paid for theirs, and
Well,
again,
they
I
don't have a
agree
kid.
with the system.
They don't have a kid.
I mean,
Surely these people in Arkansas who don't have a kid.
At current.
I'm willing to
It's
accept.
the status quo at current, and what you're advocating for is more and more of a welfare state and less and less personal responsibility.
Actually, I would not call it a welfare state because I
fucking hate the concept. I hate, like, what's it called? The personal responsibility thing is such a bullshit line. Like, people in general act rationally about things, and like this is like, it's just a way to offset the problems of society onto the individual, so you don't look at systemic problems. Like, god damn it, this guy, I don't like this guy.
I'm actually asking for something
It
that's more
absolutely is.
universal.
You'll learn
So
something
that
here.
everybody, so listen carefully. It's not even contingent upon your ability to buy it. It's not welfare. It is a universal service that is provided, very much like the concept of public school. You can go to public school if you're very wealthy or if you're not very wealthy. And society will subsidize it. Even all those people who don't have children, don't want children, don't care about educating, even those people who send their kids to private schools will subsidize the education of your kid and my kid at public school.
Mhm.
Yeah? But you don't have a problem with that. You just have a problem where you
I
want to
absolutely
draw
do,
the
but
line.
this is
You
about
just
school
want
lunches.
you just want to keep kids hungry, is that right?
No,
Well,
but
hey,
that's a typical response. I would expect that from you.
Well, do you have an answer for it?
I already answered it. I said no. Obviously not.
Well, Blake, how do you reconcile this? Just tell me how you reconcile this. It's okay for you to send your kid to public school, which is clearly subsidized by people who don't have children, never had children, never will have children. You have no problem with their tax dollars paying for your kids to go to school. But you have an issue.
I absolutely do.
I'm sorry, you do? What?
Yes, I absolutely do.
All right, well, then why are you sending your kid to public school?
Because I don't have the ability personally to change the whole goddamn system.
Okay,
Okay,
wait.
I would
But
like
you
to
do have
ask
the, hold on
him-
one second. But you do have the ability to change the system where the kids get a subsidized lunch. Is that it?
I'm not changing anything. Currently, people pay that can, and I don't think that we should lessen that responsibility, the $1 a day
Well,
that they can
what
pay.
do you say to somebody who says to you?
In order to further dissolve the responsibility that people have for their own children.
Dude, what's a bigger responsibility, providing lunch or providing education for your kid? What's a bigger responsibility?
They kind of go hand in hand.
Well, wait a second.
My daughter learns a lot of things when I cook with her, and she asks me lots of questions, and
That's great.
she learns.
Right. What's a bigger responsibility? What's a bigger responsibility?
Man, this guy
You
is
wanna
like
do it
just
in terms of
dodging
dollars? Does that
questions
make
left
it
and right.
easier if you do as says?
You feed your kid. It's education doesn't really cost anything.
Wait,
What are you talking about?
It would cost me absolutely nothing if the government allowed me to educate my daughter at home.
Wait a second. Do
Nothing.
you work? Do
Yeah,
you work
I do.
during the day?
Yep.
You do. Do you make money
Yep.
when you're working?
hmm
And so, could you educate your daughter by taking her to work with you every day?
Partially. But I
Partially.
can't bring her to work, so.
Okay. So, when you would educate her, would you stay at home and educate her?
Mhm.
So, would you be working at that time?
Yeah, I probably could. I could work something out. Yeah.
So you you could both educate her,
There's all sorts. There's all
work
there's
at
all
the same
sorts of
time.
options to work from home.
So you could see, so you could work at home and give her a good education simultaneously.
Oh yeah, no problems.
Huh.
hey, here's a social reproduction question. Do you, because you think, kids are the responsibility of the parents to do everything for, provide the money, lunch, whatever. Do you think it benefits society and the economy that people are having kids and that they're being educated and growing up to become workers?
There's no benefit or detriment to children, generally speaking. It depends on the,
so if people
the parents
stopped having kids
and their ability to support them.
So if people stopped having kids, society would function fine.
Until there was no more people and there would be no more society.
Yeah.
I don't think that.
He's got you there, Jamie.
I don't think that we should. I don't think that we should subsidize.
Why should
people that aren't capable or aren't responsible?
Why
to have
should
more and more
low-income
children?
people be subsidizing society by providing the service of reproduction and child rearing and lunch and education for free?
Well, I mean, people don't have to have kids.
And like,
but here's the.
I too wish that I was able to. I too am able to raise a child and give them a full and complete education while simultaneously working. And on top of that, everybody should be able to do that. You remember that thing from, I guess it's like, what's it called? It's not really, it's kind of gauche to talk about Harry Potter now, but wasn't there like the time when like, what's her face? Hermione was like, I'm taking so many classes that I have a fucking time travel thing that broke the entire series continuity so that I could go to extra classes or something.
The point, Blake, we're subsidizing you, but you have no problem with that.
No, I do. I already told you that I do.
But no, what I mean by no problem is that
Continue to do so.
You continue to do so,
To
which
leech off
almost
our
makes
system.
it even worse.
Yeah.
Do you buy gas?
I do buy gas, yeah.
Okay, so you don't bike everywhere.
That's correct. I don't bike everywhere.
Okay. All right. Would you like it if everybody could bike everywhere sometime, or if you didn't have to buy gas one of these days?
Sure.
Would that be good? That's good. That would be cool one day if that ever happened. Okay, so you guys complain about climate change,
right?
And the same argument could be made.
Oh
for you
no!
guys,
What's
right?
that?
He's turning into the guy in the well in that cartoon.
What's the argument?
Yeah, transpose it.
I don't agree with the way our education system is currently ensconced, let's say, and you don't agree with us being dependent on fossil fuels. You claim that I'm using the welfare system by allowing my daughter to go to public schools.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I would like that to change.
But I'm not
You
saying
use gas.
I am not.
You use gas.
I'm not judging you for using
use
for
gas.
gas in your car. Are you? Am I? You're sitting here and
But
saying
why
there's a
you have
problem.
cell phone?
There's a problem with kids getting free lunch. It would be the equivalent of me saying like, it's okay for me to drive my pickup, but it's not okay for you to drive your pickup. That's what you're saying. And I'm not saying that about climate change. I want a government policy that will fund our ability to get off of fossil fuels. You see the difference here. It's subtle. It is subtle. But I'm not telling you that you need to be more personally responsible for climate change, whereas I shouldn't be. But you're sitting here telling people that whatever I don't need is what people should be more personally responsible for. Now, I happen to need public school, but I don't need a
Why
free
do you
lunch.
think we need public school?
So I'm talking, you're articulating this to us. You've had 5 years to figure out what to do about your daughter's education. Now, I don't know if you've been sitting on your butt or what, but Blake, you're going to send your kid to public school. And you can blame the government all you want. You don't blame the government for making sure that your truck is safe, do you? You don't drive around in your truck and go, God damn it, the government wouldn't allow me to buy an unsafe truck. Do you say that ever? Of course not. Of course
no,
you don't.
I'm pretty sure I
Of course
don't.
you do not. Of course you don't. You don't drive around and say, God, I wish all these roads were still dirt.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Oh boy.
All right,
This guy
Blake.
sounds like
I
a
like
real
dirt roads.
nihilist.
I like dirt roads, Sam.
No, I do too.
Uh,
I do too, Blake.
So
I think
your idea here is that you want more and more things to be paid for
Yes.
by the public.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
Nice talking to you,
absolutely,
Blake.
That's absolutely correct.
And where has that gone thus far? The welfare state's increased, right?
Where's that got?
We've got more and more kids, and we've got more and more kids
No.
attaining less educational development and lower IQs and more poverty.
Yeah,
and all
none of
It's
that
been
is
going
It's all
away.
bullshit.
The
None
welfare
of-
state.
none of those things that you just.
Literally, oh man, he brought up IQ, just like the guy in the chat who was trying to like do like what's it called, the bell curve. This is fucking trying to what's it called? The fact that like one of the number one thing like IQs. First of all, IQs are a bad metric. Two, even if you did want to go by IQ, the IQ quotient has to be changed and adjusted every single year because it keeps going up. It has been going up every year, or should I say, kids have been performing better on the test, but because IQ is based on percentile, that it what's it called? It keeps going up. It keeps getting harder and harder to have the 100 IQ, which is supposed to be the average. So like that's like not even like it's not even the way IQ tests work. And on top of that, the number one thing that caused IQ to go up by the biggest spike in the last century was the removal of lead paint and leaded gasoline, which was caused by a fucking government program. Ugh.
Said are accurate, but I
They're all
want.
tied together.
Yeah,
Sam,
they're
and
also-
more kids are without fathers, and
Then
it's
when?
all tied together.
Then when?
Then 50 years ago, then 60 years ago, then whenever the statistics were ever taken into account.
Now, how many kids do you think were in school? Let's say 120 years ago. How much education do you think kids were getting?
Oh, wait, I misspoke. I know where you're going with this. I said more kids, right? Rates have also increased. I'm sorry.
You think the rates of education have decreased since for 120 years, or I mean, what do you?
Well, what do you define education as? I mean, are you just feeding kids information, or are you teaching them how to think critically? I mean, what's an education to you?
Well, I don't know.
If you can think critically and you can understand and you can be a skeptic,
Hey,
you can take in any
when
amount
you
of
get your
information and
homeschooling-
understand it and teach it.
Blake, when you get your homeschooling syllabus all prepared, can you send it to us?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
I absolutely will.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call, Blake.
What would you have to say about my homeschooling?
I don't know. We'll
What would
see.
you like to
I think your kids should be listening to this show every day. I would start with that. The first 3 hours of the day should be spent listening to Majority Report. Appreciate the call, Blake.
Yeah, man.
Bye.
Who's like the
I hope
person
his
who
kid
like
watches that call someday.
See, like, I don't even have the patience to sit through the Majority Report because Tristan doesn't really watch. Like, I can't handle like 3 or 4 hour long shows anymore. And yet this guy like sat through the Majority Report so he could call in and complain about like kids complaining about the crime of children getting free lunches. Man, what a winner there. This guy seems to have it all figured out. I am going to take a quick. Now that this video is done, I'm going to take a quick washroom break before we move on to the next one. So I will be right back. everybody, I'm back. Let me just get all my stuff up and ready. Okie dokie. And here we are. So that was a video. Man, I plan on making one of my dream board videos about making a video about where libertarianism comes from. And the fact that he was talking about wanting to homeschool his kids is pretty telling. Like, libertarianism started as a backlash against the desegregation of schools and businesses. And they were like, oh, well, we're not segregationists. We're anti-segregation. And, you know, I'm sure that everybody knows that, you know, how that line of reasoning goes in this day and age. But libertarianism, very much like, for one example, like libertarianism was the one for like Little Rock, Arkansas. Interesting, because he was from Arkansas. Literally ending their entire public school system because they would rather just make all of the public schools private rather than integrate them. So, yeah. Oofa doofa. I will, we'll see where that goes. We'll see, like, what's it called? I gotta make that video at some point. Anyways, this is a video called How a Disney Song Became an Alt-Right Anthem from Network 1901, who I've never heard of before. I have no idea where this is gonna go.
Recently, you might have seen this clip from the first 2020 U.S. presidential debate.
You want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what.
Who are the Proud Boys, though? They've been on the peripheral for a while. They've been a group with media coverage that I've seen on and off since 2017. And ultimately, they're an extreme group that continues to make headlines because of their views. And their intolerance for others outside of those views has led to violence and hate. So it might come as a surprise to you that the Proud Boys actually gained their name from a Disney song made famous by the Broadway version of Aladdin. Let me explain.
What?
In August of 2017, Charlottesville, Virginia saw a really big rally called Unite the Right. It's at this event that I feel the Proud Boys gained a major
Alright, I'm
name.
starting to see this everywhere now, and this is like, and myself included, and it's driving me nuts. So, okay, so here's the thing that sucks. So, glasses, like these things, anti-glare glasses. So that ones that have, I think it's not anti-glare. The fact, one of the things that glasses have these days that a lot of newer pairs are getting are a subtle tint to them so that you can, it's supposed to reduce blue light so that when you're using a screen, it produces less eye strain. Pretty good thing. But what it always results in when you get this type of lens now is you see what we saw on his video, but also I've seen it in my videos. It happens to me quite a bit, and you see it on pretty much every video where somebody has a spotlight on them while they're wearing these glasses, which is it causes this weird green glare that is uncomfortable. And I'm just noticing it everywhere. And now that I've told you, you'll see it everywhere too.
All of them with tiki torches marching through the streets in protest of a Confederate statue of Robert E. Lee being taken down. It's an iconic moment that's within modern America's timeline that's filled with uncertainty and fear. As a cis white male myself, I didn't want to be associated at all with this rally and this group of people, and neither did the tiki torch manufacturers, which had a really difficult time rebounding from this event. Since the Unite the Right rally, leader Gavin McInnes has been seen on and off. He hosts his own podcasts, he does live speaking engagements, and makes appearances in the media whenever possible. Regardless of how anybody feels about him, he's an extremely charismatic man. And without his charisma, the Proud Boys in no way would be as big as they are, having chapters all throughout the United States. Part of his charm is that he loves to tell anecdotal stories and jokes. One of those being how the Proud Boys actually got their name.
Like we're called Proud Boys because I went to one of my kids' music recitals and some ponce got up there, and while everyone's playing the piano and the violin and doing stuff they tried, he gets up and he goes, "Proud of your boy, I'll make you proud of your boy." It's some song from Aladdin. And I was looking around for the dad because I thought there's no way this dad is proud of his boy. And of course...
Proud of Your Boy was cut from the original 1992 Aladdin film and originally written by lyricist Howard Ashman, the man who also wrote lyrics to songs for The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. McGinnis's interpretation of the song is one of weakness and anti-masculinity, something that he's extremely passionate about. He has strong beliefs that men and masculinity is completely under attack in the 21st century. His anecdotal story about how the Proud Boys got their name and his joking manner about it tells a lot about what the Proud Boys are all about. They believe that masculinity can and should...
Yeah, it's bad enough, like, because, like, the thing is, like, when I used to film at my desk, like, back when I lived in Toronto and I didn't have an office big enough to have a set, I used to have to turn off my monitors before I started filming, or else I would have this huge green glare in my eyes. And right now, I have this new ring light that I built for when I'm filming now, and the green glare has come back. But the green screen removal thing kind of filters it out, which, but only does it only does it so. And so I'd like to try and see if I could find another way to fix that.
Should be aggressive and violent. That the patriarchal society that currently exists should continue to stay the status quo. In a society that continues to question what gender is or can be, the Proud Boys want to stick to male and female stereotypes and believing that women should be subservient to men, and that all other genders or identities are sinful under God. And they do this all while jokingly singing the song Proud of Your Boy as they march through the streets. This far-right Christian conservative viewpoint really contradicts that of Howard Ashman in absolutely ridiculous ways. Howard Ashman grew up as a gay Jewish New York theater kid. He had his first big break in 1982, teaming up with composer Alan Menken to create the show The Little Shop of Horrors, and that cult show would turn into a cult classic film in 1986 when it starred Rick Moranis and Ellen Greene. The success of that show would get him onto Disney's radar, as he was picked up to be the lyricist for the Little Mermaid film. And after Mermaid, he pitched his own idea for a film, Aladdin. He put together a few songs and pitched a film treatment. The movie would get greenlit, but he was whisked away to work on Beauty and the Beast after it was having some of its own problems. And Beauty and the Beast would be his last completed work, as right before it actually debuted, he would die from complications of AIDS.
Oh no.
The biggest epidemic in the US during the 1980s, and a problem that would shine a unfair...
Oh man, you, what's it called? This is like one of the saddest things is that, like, you talk to any, like, gay people over a certain age, and, like, first of all, there's so few of them, and second of all, like, the reason why there's so few of them is because, like, you talk to any of them and they lost everyone. It's fucking horrifying. What's it called? I made that video about the AIDS epidemic, and I guess it didn't, I mean, it did okay. It didn't do super, super great. But, like, fuck, that haunts me always.
Fairly negative light on the LGBTQ plus community. His death would lead to some of the songs for Aladdin being on the cutting room floor, including Proud of Your Boy, as the movie was completely rewritten before its release. The song would make it into the 2011 Broadway musical version of Aladdin, however, and become somewhat of an anthem for the LGBT plus community. Going back to his songwriting though, especially the songs he wrote for Disney, Howard Ashman's lyrics feel deeply personal. Set aside the fact that he's writing them to be sung by a mermaid or a beast. Ashman's words are extremely human. His characters, like him, showcase vulnerability and are usually minorities.
Yeah, from what I can see,
In a
this guy's got like a kind of box light, kind of like what I have, and it's causing the glare on his glasses. And I really wish there was a way to fix this. If somebody knows how to fix this in videos, please tell me, because I would love to keep using my ring light, but actually fix it.
world that rejects them for who they are. Ultimately, his views and lyrics are about communities that have been oppressed and villainized by a larger society. And the song Proud of Your Boy is truly about classism. A poor boy who grew up with a poor mother and is found stealing food. And Aladdin's stealing, although done out of necessity, is something that he struggles with as he sees the wrongdoings and the hurt that he brings to his mother. And that he'd like his mother to actually see him as a hero and to truly be proud of him. Ashman and his song are the antithesis of the Proud Boys' view on masculinity. An anti-gay, anti-Semitic group named for a song that was written by a gay Jewish man. A vulnerable moment for a character who doesn't see himself above the women in his life, and in fact chooses to do right by their moral guidance. Honestly, I'd be surprised if any Proud Boy actually did the research and knew anything about the song Proud of Your Boy, or if they understood the life and lyrics of Howard Ashman in general. Just like the Tiki Torches, a use of this song as an anthem for the alt-right could tarnish the reputation of its writer. And despite what happens in the future, there will always be a footnote in the history of this song linking it to the Proud Boys. But from my bias, I would hate to see Howard Ashman continuing to be linked to a group that continues to say hateful things and acting out in violence. In this way, I think we should continue to denounce the Proud Boys and denounce their use of this song as part of their name. Equality is something that this channel has always strived for, and I'm extremely proud.
Well, as if I needed another reason to say fuck the Proud Boys, but fuck the Proud Boys. Well, shit. That was... yeah. You could always get a cheap pair of glasses off of those glasses websites specifically for filming. Suppose I could. A feminist Star Trek pod. You listen to an interview with a Star Trek themed drag queen. That sounds like fun. Okay. It is, yeah. Oh man. It's hypocritical for guys who hate brown people to name themselves after an Aladdin song. Yeah, that's also true. Alright. So I think this is the next one. This is the next video I've got here is Bureaucracy in Cleopatra's Egypt. So let's see what that's all about.
All of recorded history, Egypt's political system in Cleopatra's time.
Oh boy, okay.
Even when you consider all
So what's it called? This is Historia Civilis. This must be an old one. Yeah, it's from 2015 because like man, it sounds like he's talking into a sock.
all of recorded history, Egypt's political system in Cleopatra's time was pretty
Did you
unusual.
ever find a plague mask? Yeah, I
In
did.
this video, I'm not really that interested in talking about pharaohs, or the royal court, or political intrigue. That's a completely different discussion. What I want to get into today is Egypt's bureaucracy, and how it functioned on a day-to-day basis. This is usually underemphasized by historians, but I find it utterly fascinating. In Cleopatra's Egypt, and by that I mean Egypt in the 1st century BCE, it was pretty much a totalitarian state. I know that that's a pretty crude way of putting it, but it's true. The level of bureaucratic control that the government exerted over day-to-day life was extreme, even by our standards, and by ancient standards, it was off the charts. Egypt's power didn't
It's
come
like,
from its
what's it
military
called? Is
might.
this Ptolemaic Egypt? Or is this like Roman Egypt? I don't know. I don't know times. What's it called? This is like way before anything I'm really familiar with. But like, God damn, this is like the part where like all the pharaohs were like white Greeks who were basically dominating over the brown indigenous population.
Or from political cunning. Their power came from incredible wealth. The wealth, in turn, came from agricultural production, which was the envy of the world, and tightly controlled by the state. Almost all agricultural land in Egypt was royal land, and by that I mean that it was personally owned by the pharaohs. The ruler of Egypt, and through them the Egyptian bureaucracy, had absolute control over this land, and through the land, the wealth of the entire country. Let me give you some specific examples. Every year, the Royal Agricultural, I don't know what word to use, Ministry, Department, Bureau, let's just say the Royal Agricultural people, provided farmers with the seeds that they were supposed to plant. Since it was royal land, the farmers had no choice but to accept. At harvest time, they were required to return to the Royal Agricultural people the exact same amount of seed that they were given to start with, along with a substantial cut of the crop yields, which served as their rent payment for the year. If you think about it, they were basically renting the seeds too. If the farmer deviated from the state's agricultural plan in any way, they were brought up on charges and prosecuted as an oath breaker. In cases like this, a council of elders called
This is kind of cool because of like the whole idea that like Egypt has always kind of taught with this like mystical tone, and it's interesting to be like, oh well, like, you know, Egypt was a country that had a government that people like lived and like were born and died in and did normal stuff. It wasn't just all giant. It wasn't all pyramids and weird religions and pharaohs and stuff, if that makes sense.
A Kenbet would sit in judgment, and the punishment would normally be something like a sizable fine. By the way, the Egyptian legal system was much more flexible than the Roman one. The Romans prided themselves on their strict legalism. The Egyptians, on the other hand, prided themselves on their pragmatism, and their courts reflected this. What was the point of punishing an oathbreaker with corporal punishment when all the government wanted was to recoup their lost revenue? You see? Pragmatism. Believe it or not, that was just one small aspect of Egyptian bureaucratic control. If a farmer wanted to do something simple, like cut down a tree that was in the way.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, what's it called? Fuck the Greeks. It was colonization, like in all words.
They had to plead their case in front of the Royal Agricultural people. Think of it like municipal bylaws.
Okay, not colonization, but it was definitely minority rule.
With the added bonus of literally being afraid for your life and livelihood if you ever made an infraction. The fact that the land was personally owned by the pharaoh was not just a formality, it was the law, and it was drilled into the farmers' heads on a daily basis. The entire farming system was carefully designed by royal officials to maximize both profits and crop yields, and they were incredibly good at this. Another example, if you wanted to brew alcohol, you had to apply to the government for a brewing license and pay a small fee. This sounds familiar to us, but it was virtually unheard of in the ancient world. Once you got that license, you were required to buy barley from a state-owned company, which, on top of their arbitrary prices, levied a hefty sales tax for its trouble. Once you brewed the beer, you were required to sell it back to another state-owned company at, again, arbitrary prices. That company then took that beer, turned around, and sold it for a profit. If it happened to be sold overseas, they took another cut in the form of export duties. As you can see, the government got like 5 or 6 bites at the pie
really
before the
like
product even made it to
Soviet
market.
communism in many ways.
This kind of heavy taxation, where the government was involved at every step in the supply chain, was present in many industries. People wouldn't see a system like this again until the modern age. In other aspects of life, state intrusiveness reached levels that we would consider unthinkable. During harvest season, people needed permission just to leave their farm or village. Freedom of movement was thrown out the window in the name of profit and productivity. To be honest, this kind of reminds me of Tsarist Russia, where people needed special royal permission to move to another farm, and sometimes that permission was denied.
Serfdom.
With Russia, historians had to invent the term serf, because people living under that regime were clearly seen as less than subjects, but more than slaves. The same kind of thing could be argued for ancient Egypt, less than subjects and more than slaves. I don't think it's crazy to say that in many ways, the rulers of Egypt personally owned their country.
Yeah, it's the serfs.
And maybe, depending on your point of view, the people in it. The
Hey,
entire
thank
state
you,
was
Middleside
basically
Top
designed
Boys.
from
Thank you
top
for
to
following.
bottom to maximize profits. This helps to explain why the Romans, who basically didn't even have a bureaucracy, looked at the Egyptians like they were from another planet. Before you click away, a brief word. I've been really hesitant to go down the Patreon road because, frankly, I look around and almost without fail, the reward system everybody's set up is embarrassing and awful.
Okay, well, that was neat. Search the reason you're here. That's awesome, Charles. I got thank Lance for that one. All right. Was the son of a former Russian serf. Wow. Jeez. Okay, so this is from March of this year, and this is Steve Shives talking about what do conservatives actually like about Star Trek. This should be fun. It'd be interesting to find out. Also, I don't think I've watched the Steve Shives videos since like 2018, so this should be interesting. I'm interested to see where this comes from. Shall we dig in?
Fandom is a funny thing. It can take people who have nothing in common other than liking the same show or band or team and bring them together into a community. And that can be a...
He has the Niners baseball cap, which I am very jealous of.
really wonderful thing. It can also be the exact opposite. After all, just because someone else is, say, a pro wrestling fan, that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with them. I know this will come as a shock to many of you, but lots of wrestling fans are major assholes. In fact, lots of people are major assholes, generally speaking. So many people that while it's always disappointing, it should never be surprising when we encounter them in our various fan communities. Having said that, I admit there is one particular subgroup of a fan community that did surprise me when I first learned about them. That group is conservatives.
He's got the disco shirts too. I wonder if they had those disco shirts in Discovery just so that they could sell the shirts. I bet that was not one of the reasons. And oh man,
fan community is, of course, the start.
And it makes me want to. And the sad part is it makes me want it because I'm not gonna lie, I really like Star Trek Discovery. I know that's like, verboten to say in Star Trek. Is that baseball hat from the show? Yeah, it's from the Deep Space Nine baseball episode, which is like one of the best episodes of Star Trek in general. Man, like I kind of like, what's it called? I'm like really enjoying Discovery. I know it's like verboten to say that in Star Trek fandom, but I really am. I really do like it. I've now watched it all the way through twice, and the new season's pilot came out, or the new season premiere came out yesterday, and it was really good.
Star Trek fan community. For those of you who are as naive as I used to be, yes, there are conservatives who love Star Trek. A lot of them. How many? How large a percentage of the overall fan base are they? I don't know, but I run into them often enough that I sometimes find myself wondering, what do conservatives actually like about Star Trek? First, let me clear something up. A second ago, I was talking about how every fandom has its assholes, and then I transitioned straight into conservative Star Trek fans. That may have given some of you the impression that I was trying to imply that conservatives are, by definition, assholes.
No, Steve Shives, that was good. You were doing a good thing, and why are you hedging it? Stevie, no. I forgot you're a lib. Oh.
So, if you are a conservative and you thought that's what I was doing just now, let me assure you, I'm not saying that being a conservative automatically means that...
No, stop being a lib.
...that you are an asshole. I'm saying it means you think like an asshole. I'm saying it means you hold certain opinions which could lead other people, judging your character on the basis of those opinions, to conclude that you're an asshole, but it doesn't mean you are one necessarily. I cannot wait for the comments on this one. Oh, your bias is so blatant. I expected you to be more.
I got shived. I got shanked by a shives. Did a switcheroo there. I just have like, I have like the whole like I'm like now like ritualistically like that Steve Shives, like, with libs and stuff like that. I don't know. I just like my expectations now are so low for liberals that it gets to me.
Impartial, but like, why? As delightful as it would be and as richly as they deserve it, I'm not going to spend the rest of this video insulting conservatives. I'm going to insult them intermittently while exploring the various aspects of Star Trek that I think they're attracted to. But before that exploration can get underway...
I mean, like, this doesn't even, like, the thing is that, like, I don't know if he's probably going to get into this at some point, but, like, Star Trek's, like golden age, like the entire time that Star Trek was running, from the time that Gene Roddenberry died in like the early 90s or the late 80s, I can't remember, all the time from like when Gene Roddenberry was dead to 2004, the show was run by a misogynistic right-wing goon, and like his influence was definitely felt on the show. Like while I like to think that Star Trek is like this great progressive thing, it was run by a reactionary asshole. And the last show that he ran, he had the most touch on, which might have been some of the most racist episodes of this entire franchise. And it wasn't until CBS brought it back that made it like a lot more tolerable. So, yeah.
I think a definition is in order. What do I mean when I say conservative? Very broadly speaking, for the purposes of this video, I'm defining a conservative as someone who favors unregulated free market economics, who wants small government, who values individual liberty but also seeks to maintain traditional social and political hierarchies, who prefers stability.
Do people feel that sometimes we leftists take the piss out of liberals and centrists more than conservatives? Maybe, but they deserve it, so it's fine.
Over social change, who is skeptical of progress, who finds social justice movements either unnecessary or threatening, who is pro-military, nationalistic, and who tends to vote for right-wing candidates in elections. Are all conservatives all of those things? No. Do some conservatives...
Like, the thing is... modern day Star Trek is kind of liberal instead of socialist, but like, yeah, like it's Star Trek's ideals have always been muddy about the politics behind them, and intentionally so, because they're kept vague enough that people can watch it without feeling threatened, which like works when you're making stuff for cable television or for broadcast television. And I just realized that the camera on Steve Shives' monitor here, this little webcam here, is the exact same one that I'm talking to you with right now.
Conservatives have traits I didn't list just now, yes. But in general, I think that gives you a pretty good idea of who I'm talking about when I say conservative. So why the hell would someone like that enjoy Star Trek, which...
So like the reason why it's much more fun to make fun of liberals than conservatives for the most part is because they're like kowtowing to power, and they tend to have a very condescending attitude. And in our current moment, when anybody with two eyes and a brain could understand that the world is falling apart because of the world that they created, they have heavy set blinders on that are just refusing to see the problems that their ideology created, and using ideas that have been discredited and thrown out for ages to try and fix them. Of course, this is me putting into the whole thing that like many people who consider themselves conservatives are also liberals, like pro-capitalist libs. But what Star Trek show was helmed by a right-wing goon? The back five or six seasons of The Next Generation, Voyager, Enterprise, and to a lesser extent, D Space Nine. Basically, as soon as Rick Berman, who is a misogynistic right-wing conservative, who hired a bunch of like racist assholes to work on his show, the one he had the most control over was Enterprise, and that's not surprisingly the most racist one. So,
has always been openly and intentionally progressive, there are a few plausible reasons. Many conservatives who have commented on my videos claim to enjoy Star Trek purely as an escapist sci-fi action-adventure show. They're either oblivious to its often heavy-handed political messaging, or they willfully ignore it. Some are so determined to view the show as...
Oh yeah, and he was also super homophobic. That's why there was barely any... Like, there was, like, one gay kiss, and it was not even, like, really a gay thing in D Space Nine, where he had probably the least control over the show because he didn't like it very much. But then, I'm talking about Rick Berman, by the way. Rick Berman is the asshole. But, like, the thing... And he always fought against writers who had good ideas, for the most part. But, like, I love that they went from, like, the Enterprise... 2004 is when Enterprise ended. And it went by... Or 2005, sorry. And there was not a single gay character on any Star Treks. And then Discovery is the next show that comes out after that, and it is just, like, full of gay people. And the new season is supposedly going to have a non-binary and a trans character on the cast. So it's like, whatever. Fuck. Wasn't Dax gay? No, it's complicated. There's a Star Trek-y reason why it wasn't, like... that, like, what's it called? There was a same-sex kiss on one episode of D Space Nine that was fought for, but it had to do with the fact that it's weird Trill stuff. And Garrick was supposed to be gay, but then, what's it called? Instead of exploring that, because the producers fought back against that, they decided to give him just this random girlfriend that makes no sense. Like, Garrick, there's this whole thing where they thought that, like, Garrick and Bashir were going to get together, but the producers on the show wouldn't let that happen, so instead they had to give Garrick a thing to prove to the audience that he was definitely a not gay, where they gave him the, what's it called, Gul Dukat's half Cardassian, half Bajoran daughter, and it's just like, ugh, I hated it. It's just like, it's all, yeah.
Nothing more than a shallow, silly outer space romp that they get annoyed with people like me for injecting politics into Star Trek, which, okay, I get that maybe you'd prefer not to focus on that part of the show because you don't like constantly being told what a dick you are, but nobody has to inject politics into Star Trek. They're already in there. Whining over people...
Oh yeah, to say that Star Trek is apolitical it's like one of the most absurd things I've heard.
Injecting politics into Star Trek makes as much sense as criticizing that video I made about...
If Garrick was actually gay, doesn't that mean Bashir was sort of a sleaze leading him on for free drinks at Quark's? I don't know. Like, the thing is, like, I think that, like, Alex Sadig and, I don't remember who the actor is who plays Garrick, but I think that they both thought it was going in this direction. It was just that then they did, like, a hard 90-degree turn, or a hard 180, when it started getting too real, and then they started going into, bullshit.
About Worf a while back for injecting Klingons into Star Trek. Like what you like for whatever reason you like it, but just because you don't pay attention to the show doesn't mean the rest of us don't. I found the "it's just a silly sci-fi show" thing to be an especially common reason given by those who have enjoyed older Star Trek shows or films but don't like more recent productions, such as the Kelvin Timeline movies or...
Yeah, there's really no such thing as an apolitical thing. All things are political in one way or another.
Discovery or Picard. I've gotten numerous comments from people who say they liked Star Trek before it got preachy, or back when the writers didn't feel the need to push their political opinions onto the audience. How did these people not...
See, this is weird because, like, I found that, maybe this is just me, but I feel like the least political Star Trek, if there was one, is probably, I mean, it's either going to be Voyager or Discovery. Although Discovery's got some good stuff in it, but it's got some pretty bad stuff too that I am very much not happy with. Like, for example, one of the things I think I really hate about Discovery is that it sort of tries to rehabilitate like the CIA, because like the whole, like, cause like I don't want to give too many spoilers, but season two of Discovery features heavily Section 31, which, like, in the Star Trek universe is supposed to be told as like the sort of like dark, shameful secret of Starfleet, which is like this, you know, black ops operation that does like seedy, underhanded shit to do that kind of thing. And I thought that fucking sucked. And like the thing is, up until this season of Discovery, and even throughout that season of Discovery, the like what's it called? The unaccountable ends justifies the means, like, status of Section 31 is shown to be, like, non-ambiguously a bad thing. But then they decided that they want to make a Section 31 TV show, and so there's this character on Star Trek on Discovery named Ash Tyler, who becomes a member of Section 31, who, like, starts saying all of this stuff that's like the kind of like CIA apologia, like, we're doing the gray stuff so that you can live up to the ideals. We needed you to be pure. And it's like, fuck you. No government needs a fucking secret police. I did not like, that's like one of the things about what's it called? It was one of the things about fucking Discovery that I was not a fan of, was sort of this attempt to rehabilitate Section 31, which is basically a way to try and like rehabilitate the CIA. And I really am not super like thrilled with the way the TV show is going. So fuck that. I hate that so much. So like that's a thing. That's a thing that annoys me. As an example. And also one of the things is that Discovery's had some, like, behind the scenes, it's had some drama, and it's had to change showrunners between seasons. Between seasons 1 and 2, they changed showrunners. And one of the things that came out of that was, in season 1, they did the, like, bury your gays trope. And in season 2, with the new runners, they were like, oh, let's not do that. Let's fix that. Let's reverse the bury your gays trope. And I thought, while it was a little convoluted, it was still, like, it was better to do that than to not do it. Yeah.
See the political messages in original series episodes like Balance of Terror or A Private Little War, or next-gen episodes like The Measure of a Man or The Outcast. For some, I think they might have missed the political content of older Star Trek because they didn't feel personally called out by it. Star Trek is popular all around the world, but it has always been first and foremost an American show produced for an American audience. That being the case, the heroes are mostly Americans, metaphorically and also literally, with a few notable exceptions like Captain Picard or Scotty, who are established as originating from outside North America and speak with accents that mark them as such. The heroes in Star Trek, especially TOS and TNG era Star Trek, are straightforward, brave, moral. They represent law and virtue and enlightenment. The Federation itself is depicted as...
Give the show to, what's it called? Kurtzman is a fucking hack. Give the series to Fuller. Fuller gets it. I thought, like, the show went from Fuller to Kurtzman, because Fuller was the one who was like, oh no, if Fuller is the person who did season 1 of Discovery, I would say he does not get it, because the early stuff in Discovery really didn't understand Star Trek in a lot of ways, like with what's it called, with like Klingons being space racists and like all sorts of weird shit like that.
As an overwhelmingly positive institution. Sure, there's a bad apple every now and then, but
yeah, it does mean also that right now the person who's running Star Trek Discovery is the person who wrote the 2009 movie and Star Trek Into Darkness. So that's a little worrying, but luckily J.J. Abrams isn't involved, so maybe it'll be better. But we'll see where it goes.
But fundamentally, the Federation exemplifies benevolent affluence. Its society is open, tolerant, and just. It tries to keep the peace, but when it goes to war, it's always for a good reason, and the enemies are invariably a dire threat to life and liberty in the galaxy. That sounds a lot like how conservatives describe the United States. The shining city on a hill, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Indispensable. Exception.
You mean Star Trek Into 9/11 Trutherism, the movie? I have to see that movie again and think about it that way. I haven't thought about that way in a while.
The socio-political problems addressed by Star Trek are usually, and in TOS and the TNG era, nearly always found in societies from outside the Federation. It's the Cardassians who occupied Bajor, the Romulans who manipulated galactic politics to their own advantage, the Klingons who practiced aggressive...
Okay, yes. I do have to say that one of the best TNG episodes has to deal with the fact that that like a bunch of Native Americans have moved to a planet in the Badlands, and that the whole plot of the episode is the Enterprise has to show up there to force to force the Native Americans who settled on the planet to go somewhere else, and it's like, oh my god.
Militarism. It's those people over there whose religious credulity allowed a con artist to take advantage of them, or who discriminated against people of a particular gender identity or sexual orientation, or who hated each other for superficial, arbitrary reasons. Despite their well-earned reputation for bigotry and small-mindedness, I've found that many conservatives...
All right, so like, yeah, when some people are talking about the Discovery Klingon, or first season of Discovery feeling like a different show, to an extent, I actually think that some of the things they contributed to Klingons are interesting. Like, I like the idea that they went through a period of political chaos. They established some new lore that I thought was actually like added to it well. Like, it was super Klingon-y to have like a ship that is covered in corpses. I thought that was pretty cool. And felt very on brand. I also liked the whole thing with the world building that was done about their 22 houses, and I also was actually pretty satisfied with what's it called? They was pretty satisfied with the way that they really built up the Mirror Universe, to the point where I wish there was a Mirror Universe show instead of this Section 31 show. Yeah. And then someone's like, yeah, didn't Voyager have a main cast member? There's a native character, a collection of stereotypes because the writers were listening to an expert who's pretending to be a native person. This is true. But you know what? Because people were talking about being decanonized earlier, which also sucked, is that the first Native American Starfleet officer on a show was in the animated series. And he was not a collection of stereotypes. I don't remember what his name was. Let me see if I can remember it. So it's like a Native American officer, Star Trek animated series. His name was Ensign Walking Bear. There you go. And he was pretty cool. I did not like the Mirror Universe's episodes in Deep Space Nine were fun. So, yeah, there you go. Like the animated series based on the 60s series. Yeah.
Conservatives are willing, even eager, to support social justice movements so long as those movements operate externally. Women's liberation is fine for Saudi Arabia, just not for us. We don't need it here. It's them over there. They've got the problem. I'm not saying Star Trek intentionally sends the message that the United States is an ideal society and its own.
I think we have enough shows featuring shitty people being shitty to one another. Like, it's fun to visit, but I don't think it could end up a whole show. Well, like, my idea, like, the idea that I had behind it was to make a show called Star Trek Resistance. And it would be, what's it called? It would feature, it would feature the Alliance fighting the Terran Empire. Like, it'd be like, what's it called? It would be the scrappy rebels that are made up of like Andorians and Vulcans and Klingons and stuff, and they would be trying to take down the mighty evil Terran Empire, because a group of multicultural scrappy rebels taking down a fascist empire feels like a really good show that should exist on TV right now.
Other countries that need fixing, but because the show's political messages are so often carried by stories where the heroes confront the problems of other cultures rather than their own, it's easy to see how some people in the audience...
But don't we know they lose? No, they win! Because by the time you get to Deep Space Nine, the Terran Empire's been destroyed, and the Alliance is basically ruling the galaxy. So you do know at some point the Terran Empire does get defeated. So I think that it would actually be a really great TV show to see these scrappy rebels take over. Now, they become like an evil empire after that, but that's a century later. You don't have to deal with that.
People who aren't naturally inclined to concern about social justice issues in their own culture.
You seem to know a bit about nomadic, semi-nomadic cultures. Do you know how social class worked in these societies? I read during antiquity there were female Hunnic warriors. There actually was, like, not really, like, the thing about a lot of nomadic and semi-nomadic cultures, fairly often, like, things like property were not really strong cultural things. So, like, being rich doesn't really mean much if you can only really, the amount of possessions you have are the things you can carry with you. So while, like, a lot of those cultures had spiritual leaders, they tended to show status more through giving gifts. So somebody who gave away a lot of presents was considered somebody of high status, which sounds much healthier. But, like, for the most part, like, nomadic and semi-nomadic societies, while they did have, like, a ruling class, or they did have, like, the chief, who was typically a man but was elected by women, that would be, like... That was like the leadership, but in the end, there was a lot more people were a lot more beholden to each other, and the society in general was a lot more horizontal than, say, like, the society we live in now.
To begin with, can take it that way. They need to change is a much more acceptable message than we need to change. And that holds true for all of us, no matter where we fall on the political spectrum, but I think it especially applies to conservatives because hostility to change isn't just their natural human instinct, it's a pillar of their worldview. There's something else that we all tend to do, again, regardless of our political perspectives, that helps to account for how conservatives could enjoy a show as didactically progressive as Star Trek. We interpret things in ways that are comfortable for us. There have been numerous episodes of Star Trek with political messages which, by my reading, are harshly critical of the right-wing politics and antiquated social attitudes typically embraced by conservatives. But I've found that many conservatives are able to enjoy those episodes because they just don't see them the same way I do. For instance, take the TNG episode The Drumhead. To me, and to most people, including Jerry Taylor, who wrote it, the Drumhead is a warning against the dangers of Red Scare-style witch hunts. It's one of the few TNG-era episodes where the threat does come from within the Federation. The villain of...
I mean, like, that's not one of the few... Like, what's it called? There's a lot of... If I had a nickel for every time the bad guy of a TNG episode was an evil admiral, I think I'd be pretty wealthy.
The piece, Admiral Satie seeks to discredit and destroy first an otherwise innocent Enterprise crewman who is found to have concealed his Romulan heritage, and then Captain Picard himself, whose only crime was to question Admiral Satie's methods while standing up for the persecuted crewmen. As Picard says to Worf at the end of the episode, villains like Admiral Satie will always be around. And every society, even one as evolved and...
I do like, there's something kind of like anarchisty about it, maybe my interpretation of it, that the fact that like in Star Trek, like with the exception of like Discovery, admirals just seem to be evil without any like hesitation. And it's just like, oh, if you're part of the class that doesn't actually do any work, then you become evil and domineering, and it's like, and you become more morally relativistic and more like, you know, or what's it called, more morally gray, and you start seeing ends justifies the means stuff, and it's like, yes, it's true. No matter what job you have, even in space, even in fully automated luxury space communism, admiral, like what's it called, your boss still sucks. What's it called? The evil admiral is like the plot of the entire movie Star Trek Insurrection, for example.
Enlightened as the Federation of the 24th century will have to remain eternally vigilant in order.
And there is a common plot point in Star Trek about captains becoming admirals and then realizing how full of shit the job is, and their true desire to be going back to work and being a captain again. Like that, I think that's happened like at least once in the show, or I think it was in the movies.
Order to stop them from exploiting our fears and prejudices in order to gain power. The most dangerous thought we can ever have is...
Oh my God, Duke of Fall, you just hit it right on the head. Every role where you make decisions that you do not personally suffer the consequences of, those decisions turn you into a monster. That is like the definition of anarchism or the reason why I think anarchists should be against the concept of hierarchies and power. Like, if anything sort of solidifies that my beliefs on it, it's that line. Holy shit.
Is that it couldn't happen.
And fuck William
here.
Shatner, for sure.
That's how I read it. However, I've seen conservative Star Trek fans cite Picard's defense of individual liberty during his testimony at Admiral Satie's hearing in order to justify tolerating hate speech. Because, after all, as Picard says in that scene, the first time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged. Clearly he was championing the cause of deplatformed white supremacists and Islamophobes. Is that an incorrect reading of the text of that episode? Well, no, that's not really how it works. Terms like correct and incorrect don't apply. A reading of the drumhead wherein the episode argues, albeit indirectly, in favor of tolerating hate speech is one of many possible interpretations. I think it says a whole lot more about the priorities of the person doing the interpreting than the intentions of the people who made the episode, but the point is, the explanation for how a conservative could like that episode lies in the possibility of such an interpretation. It's not just episodes. People can read characters they like or identify with so that those characters seem a lot more like them than their creators probably intended. A few years ago, Anna Marie Cox interviewed Republican Senator, spineless Trump bootlicker, and all-around sack of shit Ted Cruz, and during their conversation, Cruz revealed that not only is Kirk his favorite Star Trek captain, but he thinks it's quite likely that Kirk is a Republican. I guess it kind of makes sense if I get inside Ted Cruz's...
It's interesting, this is interesting because like right now, in like our Star Trek chronological watch through, Kelly and I are watching right now, what's it called? We're watching the original series now, and I'm just like, I haven't really like sat down and like, all right, I'm gonna watch TOS now all the way through, or all the episodes that don't suck. And all I'm thinking is like, man, what's it called? Kirk is like the most fucking cash. There's two things I've noticed going through the 60s show so far, which is one, Kirk is like casual as all hell. He has like random bridge officers just referring to him as Jim and stuff like that. And second, man, the Enterprise fucking kills a lot of its crew in the original show. Man, we haven't like, what's it called? They just like, and they like don't, they're like super like cash about everything that happens. So like, I think like the first episode we watched, like 5 or 6 crew members just fucking die, and nobody seems all that shook up about it. Which is the first episode is one where like a salt monster is eating people on the ship because it's a 60s show. Then the next episode we watch, they like, what's it called? They just like have like this moment where like the ship gets like almost blown up and like 8 people die, and then they're just like, oh, okay, all right, moving on. And I just thought that was really funny. And yeah, why have they not solved the exploding work terminal problem? I've talked about that before too. Like, why is it that they have all of their things rigged to explode whenever the ship takes a hit? And the other thing too is that, what's it called? There's a thing where Star Trek... There's a thing where, like, you'd think that at Red Alert they'd have seatbelts. You've encountered those in Star Trek Adventures? Man, I would love to play a Star Trek Adventures campaign. It's like one of the #1 shows I want to play. Or one #1 tabletop games I want to play. And maybe if Kelly's invested enough, we might be able to get... if we could find a group to play it, maybe. Have you watched any episodes where they find exact duplicates of Earth out in space and no one thinks that's weird? Not yet.
His head, which is easy actually. I just imagine what it's like to hate marginalized people more than I love my wife. I mean, Kirk does recite the preamble to the U.S. Constitution at the end of the Omega Glory, and we all know how much American conservatives love the Constitution. It's where most of them discovered
the Omega Glory. That is such a fucking weird episode. That's like an episode where like a group of Americans, I think a group of Soviets, are dropped on a planet, and they've been fighting each other for so long that they've forgotten what the story was about, because I think they got sent back in time like 1,000 years or something. And so you find out, like, the big reveal at the end of the episode, by the way, I'm like spoiling it because the episode kind of sucks, is that you find out that the one side is like worshiping like the American flag and the Constitution. It's like, oh man, it's such a fucking weird episode.
Joys of self-servingly and selectively interpreting texts. On the other hand, in Star Trek VI, Captain Kirk acknowledges and overcomes his own racism, so I don't see how he could possibly be a Republican.
Oh man, I can't wait to watch that episode, or that movie. The Undiscovered Country, the Undiscovered Country probably has the best story arc for Kirk out of all of them, because I find like Kirk is actually kind of not a really compelling character. Like, he doesn't really learn a whole lot. He just kind of wins all the time, and like, that's kind of boring. But like, yeah, Star Trek VI I think is like the only Star Trek movie where Captain Kirk actually has an interesting story. Like, he has an interesting character arc throughout the series, throughout the movie.
Republican, just as a matter of canon. Keep in mind, in that same interview, Cruise also says the original Star Trek pressed for racial equality, but it did so without sermonizing, which... Okay, how many goddamn times do I have to cut to stills from Let That Be Your Last Battlefield before you assholes accept that Star Trek, the original series, was the preachiest show ever?
Lots of throwaway jokes about things like, why didn't Starfleet think of seatbelts? For real. Like, the #1 thing, like, so many people in Star Trek, like, on those, like, scenes where they got the bridge wiggle set going, and they're like, you're dealing, when you're having one of those scenes where it's like, Captain, shields down to 43%, and then they'll be like, reroute power from life support to the forward deflector phaser, and like, then the thing explodes. There's always a scene where one of the fucking panels explodes, and like the ensign like goes flying back like 10 feet somehow, and like dies from a concussion. And it's like, man, it'd be really great if they had seatbelts.
Ever. It's always been political. It's never been subtle about it. They're half white and half black, for Christ's sake. This is understated social commentary to you? There's also a streak of conservatism tucked away within Star Trek's oft-celebrated aspirational vision of the future. Again, I don't think it's intentional.
You can't get actors to wiggle convincingly with seatbelts. Here's the thing, though, is that like on those sets, like whenever they build the bridge sets for Star Trek shows, they actually build the set so that it actually rocks. Like, they actually rock the ship. So it's not like they're acting, they're like getting thrown around. It's like real. It's real.
But it's definitely there, and I can see how it might appeal to a person.
So they retconned it as, in the episode they just say it's like an alternate history Earth where the Cold War got hot. 3 times the ship encountered planets that were like alternate Earths out in space. They take the full force of the explosion. Maybe, but I feel like they could also maybe make it so that when their console's short, instead of like they could short, so they could like, because you can design this with electrical engineering today, you can make it so that there's a big surge of energy running through your console because your shields got overloaded or whatever the fuck of how Star Trek physics works. That you have something, it's called a fucking like what's it called? Not an amp. What are those? What's it called? The things you have in like your house that literally, when these situations happen, they disconnect and then you go flip them and turn them. A circuit breaker. You just put a circuit. You can put a fuse or a circuit breaker in your thing, so that when it overloads, instead of blowing up and killing your ensigns, you could just put a circuit breaker in it, and they'd be like, "Oh shit, the what's it called? The panel overloaded. Well, I'm just gonna flip the circuit breaker and turn it back on. Isn't this great?" So there you go.
With a conservative mindset. Star Trek depicts the Earth of centuries to come as a paradise, a place of prosperity and equality and peace. It's a prophecy of hope and possibility. We can overcome our prejudices. We can value curiosity over ignorance. We can live by our noblest ideals instead of our worst impulses. And when we do, we can create a world without poverty, without war, where everyone has an opportunity to live and grow and explore their potential. And it's all so far in the future that we don't need to even worry about building toward it right now. See, there are 2 ways to respond to Star Trek's depiction of a hopeful future for humanity. There's the progressive response. Now that we have an idea of what the world could be like if we achieved something close to true social justice and equality, let's all get to work making that world happen. That's the response the creators of Star Trek were hoping for when they made the show. Gene Roddenberry said so. But there's also the conservative response. Humanity figures all this stuff out eventually, so just relax. Let's also remember that, as is explicitly established in the film Star Trek First Contact, humanity doesn't really start to get its shit together until after Zefram Cochrane becomes the first human to fly a ship at warp speed, which attracts the attention of the Vulcans. Which means not only is our happy, egalitarian future far enough away that we don't have to start working on it for a while yet, it's just a fantasy anyway. It's all a part of the silly space show. Just enjoy the silly space show that isn't about anything. I've also gotten this from conservative Star Trek fans more times than I can remember.
See, like, it's a political, poignant series of movies and TV shows. It is also, and I will defend this, it is a silly space show. And that's why I love it.
Star Trek shows us what we can accomplish when we stop making everything about race and gender. Seems like an odd statement to make in reference to a show that has produced so many episodes arguing passionately against unjust discrimination. If Star Trek is saying the solution to racism is to stop talking about racism, why does Star Trek talk about racism so much? But that's another.
Yeah, there's there's like literally a scene, like this is a thing. Like, they're talking about how, like, oh, Star Trek doesn't talk about race. There's literally an episode where, like, everybody's getting into a holodeck program that takes place in a 1960s casino. And they end up doing a heist episode where they need to get something for, it's Star Trek stuff, but they need to do a bank heist in the holodeck as part of the game for some reason. And they try to get Cisco on board, the captain, Cisco. And he says, I'm not going to fucking go on that thing. I'm not going to go into that fucking thing. Because, like, it's a sanitized version of the 1960s. He's just like, he literally is like, do you know how horrible that period was for black people? Like, I'm not going to like, participate in that. And he eventually gets talked into doing it, but, like, that's an important thing to point out. And, it's like a big part of the episode. I don't know.
Intended consequence of showing us a society where people,
because the plot of it is like, oh, like one of the holographic characters has become like our friend, and he kind of comes out of the woodwork so that he can help save him, basically.
Have finally put,
and it is one of the best episodes of the series as well. Season 7 was a really, really good episode of Season 7 was a really good season of Deep Space Nine. But also the episode where the prophets have what's it called? Cisco go to being like a author who like a pulp science fiction author in the 1950s, and it's entirely about racism. In fact, this picture here on the screen is from that episode. And not only is it like it's not a one-off thing, because later in the show, it turns out that this like vision he has is actually important to the overall story.
Put a lid on prejudice and inequality. Conservatives see a diverse, multicultural, gender-equal society where racism and sexism are hardly ever even mentioned explicitly, and they think, see, the crew of the Enterprise gets along fine and they don't worry about this stuff. Why should we? Up to this point, the reasons I've offered for why conservatives like Star Trek...
I wish somebody on Voyager pointed out how sexist and racist Tom's Captain Proton program was. Yeah, they tried to do another Vic Fontaine or another, what's that other one? Dixon something? What's it called? The Private Eye hologram program that Picard plays in. They try to do that with like a kind of like Flash Gordon type thing, and it sucks. It's never good. Although the episode that is entirely focused around it is one of the more fun episodes of Voyager, so maybe it's okay.
Have been based heavily on interpretation, but there are other aspects of Star Trek that I think allow the show to appeal to a conservative without having to read them differently than the authors intended, write them off as fantasies, or allow them to be swapped.
Oh, yeah, while we're talking about diversity and stuff in the cast, also an interesting thing to point out is that if you look here, this is Ensign Chekhov, and he's like, you know, he's one of the regular cast of the original show, and he's pretty cool. But it's sort of like, because we live in a post-Cold War world, the significance of him is kind of like diminished. But even though he does a Polish accent, he does a Russian, he's supposed to be Russian. And during the Cold War, that was like actually kind of significant too.
Swallowed up by the pulverizing gravity well of moral apathy and selfishness that sits where their heart should be. In certain ways, Star Trek is a lot more conservative than politically correct SJW soy boys like myself like to admit. The most conservative thing about Star Trek is probably...
I remember the Vision episode being a really cool episode, but I don't remember it being particular important to the overall plot of the show. He returns to it later because there's like a part where... There's an episode later on where the prophets are testing Cisco, or he's dealing with something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it flashes forward to him being in an insane asylum, and he has to like... it's in a different episode. It's like almost like a season later, and he has to like... Or is that in the same episode? There's something else where he does make a reference back to it. It's escaping me right now, but... the episode does come up again later.
That it centers, for the most part, on Starfleet, which is a military organization. I know...
Was the tail end of the Cold War? If anything, like, what's it called? The last movie with the original series crew, the Undiscovered Country, Star Trek VI, is basically also a movie about the end of the Cold War, which is also cool.
Company line, both in universe and in real life, is that Starfleet is not the military. Its purpose is science and exploration and diplomacy, and that's great, but also that's bullshit. Yes, Starfleet does all of those things, but it also has a ranked hierarchy, a formal chain of command, and when the Federation goes to war...
All right, like, let's be fair. Starfleet's chain of command is a messy one at best. And is way more informal than a military of today.
It's Starfleet that fights. There's no getting around it. It's the Space Navy. And in Star Trek, Starfleet is the ultimate instrument of good. Starfleet brings aid to the needy. It brings civilization to wild, uncharted worlds in the form of Federation colonies. It protects the Federation and indeed the rest of the galaxy from the threats of other, less benevolent nations. That's exactly how many American conservatives see our...
They did get a Russian guy to play him in, Walter Koenig is Russian, but he's like what's it called? He's like Russian in the sense that, like, you talk to any random American and they say they're Irish. Like, he has family that immigrated from Russia like 1,000,000 years ago. But I totally makes sense. And yeah, the fact that his name is I think his name is Yakov something. I think his name was Yakov. He's the guy who played Chekhov in the J.J. Abrams movies, who passed away, which sucks because he was like probably one of the better parts of those movies. And also, it kind of sucks because I would have said that Star Trek Beyond was the best of those movies, of those Kelvin timeline movies, to the point where I actually think that Star Trek Beyond was actually like good. And Anton Yelkin, that's it. And yeah, like, the thing is, like, him dying, like, I think is one of the reasons that they kind of stopped making the movies. Also because Star Trek Beyond didn't do very well. Which sucks because it was good and it felt like a Star Trek movie for the first time in that kind of series. But then, like, then they stopped, and I was like, oh, it's just now figuring out what it wants to be. And I think they are planning on making a new one. The USSR was a thing by the time First Contact was made. Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. The timeline of that part is intentionally left muddy now because now that the parts that they made predictions about have kind of passed. Like the fact there wasn't they like reference that a eugenics war happened in Star Trek's past, but they don't reference that it happened in the year 1996. So, like, there's some complex stuff that happens there. First Contact was not 1996. First Contact was, I mean, the movie was 1996. Or I think it was 1998, actually. But First Contact was like 2063 or something like that. But yeah, like the Kelvin timeline, like Paramount Star Trek universe was just starting to get interesting before it kind of died, and I would really like if they kept it in that vein, then it would have been really good. But it kind of died. Although, like I said, I was hearing that they were working on a fourth one. And things sort of fell apart because the movie was supposed to have Chris Hemsworth, who plays Kirk's father. He was supposed to be in it, and it was supposed to be this like kind of like time travel-y movie. But then what's it called? They there's supposed to be like this time travel-y movie, but it fell apart because Chris Hemsworth his career was obviously exploding because of playing Thor in all those Marvel movies. And now we might now be past the era of movies, period. Like, it's what's it called? It's looking kind of likely that after COVID wipes up, one of the things that might happen or might come out of it is that we might just not have movie theaters anymore, which would be a whole thing. And I don't know if they're going to be willing to dump like hundreds of millions of dollars into Star Trek 4. Yeah, especially because I imagine that J.J. Abrams is now a bit more expensive to get a hold of because of what's it called? Because of doing the Star Wars movies. That was another reason why it kind of fell apart, is that J.J. Abrams went to go do a Star Wars. But yeah. There might not be movie theaters, at least for a long while after this is over. The industry might just die, which is interesting because also in movies, like, I don't know, we'll see where it goes.
Armed forces. Why wouldn't they enjoy a show that celebrates and glorifies the military and reinforces their view of it as a noble and necessary institution? There's also the fact that most Star Trek heroes have been human, and the majority of them have been white, particularly the series leads, while the villains are nearly always identifiable at a glance as non-human. Klingons have bumpy foreheads and darker skin. Cardassians have visible ridges on their faces and necks and darker skin. Jem'Hadar have bony spikes, a rugged reptilian appearance. and darker skin. Are you starting to see why this might appeal to conservative white people? It's not that Star Trek is intentionally racist, usually, but it does contain certain tropes that people with racist beliefs, biases, or assumptions could find comforting. In conclusion, if you are...
Oh man, Revenge of the Gorn. I am so... This is like one of the reasons... Like, the original series is kind of a really weird Star Trek show. One of the ones I'm super excited for is the show Kelly, the episode with the Gorn. Oh man, the Gorn is just such like the ultimate, like, if there's like one episode of the Star Trek original series that epitomizes the like fun, campy silliness that the show, the heights of campy silliness that it can hit, it's the episode with the Gorn, and I cannot wait to see that episode because it's so silly. I love it.
Conservative who is a Star Trek fan.
So like what's it called? To Steve Shives, I would say, if you think that Star Trek is not a silly space show, then, sir, you are ignoring the incredible comedic work that went into that Gorn episode.
Please don't watch my channel. But before you go, I'm really not trying to gatekeep the Star Trek fan community. It's not up to me or anyone else to decide who is a real Trekkie and who isn't. If you like Star Trek, then you're a Star Trek fan, and I'm not here to tell you otherwise. I am here to make fun of you, because you have it coming, for being a boulder around the neck of society, and to tell you that your politics suck and are the cause of many of the problems addressed by Star Trek, and represent the antithesis of the intended message of Star Trek.
They've implied that the Gorn are coming back in Discovery. I hope. See, here's the two things I really want to see. Oh yeah, you like the Katians, for obvious reasons. I love that on Lower Decks. There's what's it called? The chief medical officer is a Katian who just like has like the most foul mouth ever. I think she's awesome. She's one of the better side characters on that show, and I love it. But the other thing, if the Gorn come back, one of my favorite things that I saw in the most recent episode of Discovery. I'm not going to spoil anything, so don't worry. But the season 3 premiere of Discovery features. You might miss it if you don't look for it, but it features an alien from Morn's species, which people who like Deep Space Nine will know that Morn is hilarious. And so there's a Morn. I don't know what the Morn aliens are called, but there is one very briefly in the new season. But I am really excited to look for what I want to see in Discovery Season 3, now that they're in the future. And I'm hoping this will happen, is that I want to see how the CBS Star Trek universe, like when you saw Orions and Andorians in the new episode, in the new season, they did like kind of like an update. Like they have more budget, they have like, you know, makeup technology has improved over the years, and so the Andorians and the Orions look pretty cool. And I was like, oh man, I really want to see what CBS does if they do like Ferengi, Cardassians, and Bajorans. I'd really love to see some of those in this season of Discovery, and I would be really happy to see what like the CBS Star Trek universe's Ferengi look like, etc. And I feel like Cardassians can be cool because they've been making all the aliens just a little bit more alien. Did Lower Decks get canned? No. The first season just ended. It had its season finale, and it's definitely coming back next season, especially because we're going to have to go through a year where like people can't film TV shows really. So I feel like Lower Decks might actually get the spotlight for a little while because it's the animated one. Don't Bajorans look almost human? I hope so, but I'd be interested to see if they do anything different. I'm more interested in seeing what they do with Cardassians and Ferengi, because I feel like if they can make them, if they have license to make all the aliens like a little bit more alien, then I feel like the Bajorans and the Cardassians and the Ferengi could look really cool. They did one thing you will say about Enterprise is that they did do a lot more world building of the Andorians. That is true, and I thought that was good. Same with the Vulcans. They did a lot more Vulcan world building that I liked. And Tellarites. Tellarites were just like sort of weird pig aliens in the background in a lot of Star Trek stuff, but Enterprise sort of gave them a little bit more juice too. Not as much as the other two, but they did give them some.
Whatever message you take from it is your business. Please feel free to discuss it somewhere else with someone who is not me. I don't care. So, yeah, There are lots of reasons why conservatives might like Star Trek. I don't think the creators of the various Star Trek series have had appealing to conservatives or validating conservative attitudes in mind very often while producing the shows, but that doesn't matter.
It's the part of the stream where Phoebe wants to be fed, and so she's going to be annoying and just stare at me for the rest of the hour. She's like giving me a death glare right now.
We can all watch the exact same show and take away entirely different things from it. Often, what we take away looks an awful...
I was annoyed what they did with the Klingons. I guess I like the TNG version of them. I mean, the TNG version of them were fun. I think that the CBS revision of Klingons are similar enough that I feel like it's good. It's fine. I actually think it's great. I'm actually okay with like the revamp, especially like kind of near the end where they made them, they have hair again and everything like that. I feel like that's on board. I like the Star Trek aliens now that they have a little bit more budget, that they can actually make them a little bit more alien. I think that's cool.
A lot like what we brought with us.
And just like, it's kind of like a thing about like realizing that the, CG budgets change, times change, technology gets better, and so they can do more cool stuff with it. And I would love to see how it looks. Alrighty. Well, that's a thing.
Well, folks, there you have the...
Well, that was fun. It's a good one. Let's see some pit bull puppies. Meet their dad. Okay, let's see what happens here.
Are those your babies? Where'd your babies go? These your babies? These your babies? You excited? These your babies. He's your baby girl.
Alright, this lady is...
Baby girl.
This is cute. I just want to, like, turn this down because this lady talking is kind of creepy. Those are some cute baby puppies. Alright, I don't think we need... There's this 3-minute long video, but I think we got the picture. Good stuff. Let's talk about Scottish imperialism, cultural amnesia, and Ben Shapiro. Well, those are things. Alright, let's see what this is like.
Scotland. What first springs to mind when I say the word? Whiskey? Bagpipes? Romantic scenery, maybe? Freedom? Well, what about imperialism, colonialism, and slavery? Oh yeah. We tend to forget about imperialism in Scotland, but that was more England, right? Right?
Uh-oh, we gonna learn about New Caledonia? When the studio was considering canceling Enterprise, people protested at the studio. I feel like there were maybe some more important things to protest in 2004, for sure.
There's been a fair amount of criticism concerning how Britain deals with its legacy of imperialism and colonialism, but what's less commonly discussed are the particular and curious ways in which Scotland fails to grapple with its imperial legacy. While there have been attempts to try and bring Scotland's role in imperialism to light, I find that people will still do a few different things. They'll minimise Scotland's role in empire, like, that was the British or English, that wasn't the Scottish. And tied to this, I've seen people claim that Scotland's less responsible for empire or colonialism because we ourselves were victims of English colonialism. This video deals with these perspectives and shows how Scotland was deeply involved in empire, how we materially benefited from it, how we distance ourselves from it, and the modern day political impact of this. And how Ben Shapiro is all involved in all of this.
These are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings.
Don't worry, I'm not going to wear this stupid hat the whole way
This
through
is
the
weird.
video.
Oh, John the Duncan, are you this
I don't want
person? Oh yeah, that's the name of the channel. Well, there you go. Did somebody tell you that I was in here? Or is this just you and you were watching the stream the whole time? Either way, fun golf hat.
Like an idiot on the internet.
Or is this gonna be about? I'm trying to remember. Didn't Scotland like try to set up a colony in Central America at some point, and like, it cost them so much money to start this colony, and they tried to raise sheep in the jungle, and it like went so poorly that they basically lost all their money, and that resulted in like a chain of events that led to Scotland basically being annexed by England. Am I right or wrong on that? I'm trying to remember.
Part 1. A Scottish Empire.
There's a notion among some Scottish people that we weren't really involved with the British Empire. That was the English, that wasn't really us. And this isn't like that surprising, because this was a particular strategy used by Victorian Scots to distance themselves from some of the worst aspects of British imperialism, like the slave trade. They point to facts like the relatively low number of slave ships that would come into Glasgow compared with English ports like Liverpool as evidence to support the idea that Scotland wasn't involved with at least the slave trade, if not empire as a whole. And this attitude, which has pervaded across time, has morphed into new expressions. For example, in 2009, the Scottish National Party produced a pamphlet which was supposed to encourage people of Scottish heritage across the world to come home. The problem was that they only marketed it to New Zealand, Australia and Canada, rather than all former British colonies, which is quite interesting. The promotional photos were all...
Alright, I gotta know if like the SNP is the SNP bad? I've heard a couple things where it's like they have some like racist shit. There's some like there's some people I've seen on Twitter who say that there's like some turfy shit that goes on in the SNP. Like, I don't know, is this if Scotland's gonna try and break off of the English yoke, is the SNP who they want to lead them into it? I don't know. Firmly neoliberal. Lovely.
Of white people, until in the face of criticism, one Asian face was airbrushed in. So what is Scotland's imperial history? Well, firstly, while there's some contention over how pivotal the role of Scotland's failed colonial project was...
Yeah, there's a trans woman there's a trans woman on Twitter who lives in Scotland, and she's like really against Scottish independence because she thinks that the turfiness of Scotland will get way worse if Scotland becomes independent for some reason that I don't understand.
In pushing the Scottish ruling class to establish the union between Scotland and England in 1707, what's more certain is that the union gave the green light for Scotland to become deeply involved in empire. The Act of Union, which was the piece of legislation which brought the two countries together, itself compensated investors in Scotland's failed colonial project with £400,000, and the failed colonial experience taught fledgling Scottish imperialists of the importance of access to English colonial markets and of the protection of the English Navy. And with the Act of Union, Scottish people began flooding every part of the now British Empire. While Glasgow wasn't really a slave port, it did monopolise Chesapeake tobacco trade by the end of the 18th century, and it was deeply involved in chattel slavery through its use as a port for sugar and trade across the empire. In fact, Scotland has a deep connection to the slave trade, particularly in the Caribbean, where Scottish people were disproportionately numerous in slave societies. In fact, Scottish people were disproportionately represented throughout every level of empire, in intellectual, administrative, military and governmental positions.
We have a shared history. Whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, we do have a shared history with them, because at some time In our country's history, Scottish people operated a slave fort in Sierra Leone because all the able-bodied men were shipped off as slaves.
And we Scots were involved from top to bottom.
Well, from 1728.
Oh man, there's not enough porridge drawers in the world to make up for doing that.
Till 1807, when the fort closed down, yes, it was run by Scottish companies. Yep.
It wasn't just a case of Scottish plebs being used as cannon fodder by English toffs, but of Scottish influence at literally every level of the imperial project, including at the forefront of the missionary project, which lent imperialism its moral legitimacy as God's work, as J.M. Mackenzie puts it.
The Scots' infiltration of
Must be the tension, must be quite the tension to have been subjugated by England, but also played a part in colonialism. Yeah, there's sort of like, I'm like kind of interested in the commonalities between what I'm kind of calling sandwich colonists. I feel like there's like a strange bond that, and some strange like commonalities between like groups like French Canadians, like Boers, and I guess Scottish people too. I will say a lot of this stuff that's being said about Scotland, you can also say about Ireland.
The East India Company's marine and medical establishments.
Hey, I know that voice. That's it's Tom Nichols. Good voice to get.
Was notorious. So was their presence at every level of the company's activities, as soldiers, governors, diplomats, and Orientalist scholars. As is now well known, Warren Hastings, a pivotal figure in British imperialism in India, gathered a group of Scots around him. And Scots governors in southern India were later to institute a wholly new land revenue system based upon the peasantry.
Scotland and Scottish people played a fundamental role throughout the entirety of the British Empire. On top of this, the material impact of imperialism on Scotland was undoubtedly massive, as streams of goods, trade and wealth stolen from colonies across the world was funneled into Scotland's industrial development and basically created the country that we have today. This process can be generalised across the entirety of the global north, and if you want to learn more about how imperialism presented a massive project of colonial theft, then I can't recommend Jason Hickel's book, The Divide, more highly. More than just developing Scotland's industry though, imperialism was central in generating a Scottish identity which is still evident today. Clear examples of this are things like tartan, which before Empire was just associated with the Highland clans, which as Lisa points out, 9 out of 10 Scots saw as the sign of a thief, or presumably also the sign of an immortal being who takes heads.
There can be only one.
But with the Empire there was a conscious effort led by figures such as Walter Scott, who you might know from his Goth-ass monument in Edinburgh, to create a romantic image of the Scottish warrior hero clad in striking tartan, an image which took hold of the Scottish cultural imagination.
This is Robert Roy MacGregor, come to reclaim the 32 beasts stolen from his lordship, James Graham, Marquis of Montrose.
And there were other aspects of Scottish cultural identity that were also forged within imperialism. For example, at the start of this video I listed romantic scenery as something which is closely associated with Scotland. Creating this link in the cultural imagination between Scotland and beautiful scenery was a central aspect of what were called the Scottish Imperial Exhibitions, which took place in the 19th and 20th centuries, and were like big carnivals to imperialism, with the explicit goal of creating a new Scottish cultural renaissance within the imperial and colonial frame. These exhibitions emphasised the romantic Scottish scenery alongside its heroic myths in an attempt to create tourism and bring tourism from across Empire to Scotland to bring people home. And on the political level, Scottish political figures and organisations from across the spectrum, including trade unionist and founder of the Labour Party, Keir Hardie,
I don't have a
would
whole lot
often
of trust for
emphasise Scotland's
nationalist
role
parties
in
in
empire
general.
as a way to legitimate their political demands. Frankly, I find this really fascinating because taken together it seems like British imperialism
I like the
didn't
Marx
just create
thrust, by
like a
the way.
single cohesive British identity, rather it enabled the generation of subnational identity in Scotland, which enabled the generation of
Is that-
further national myths.
Maybe I'm
like
wrong here.
The heroic Scot.
But is like this thing here, I'm probably wrong. I imagine that I am. But this thing here that I'm like moving my cursor around up in the corner, that looks like the part of the symbol for English fascists, is it not?
Scottish warrior hero, which might not have been present otherwise. Whatever national identity exists in Scotland today has much of its foundation in the project of empire. So what changed?
Part 2. Cultural amnesia.
As empire declined, there were degrees of difference in how different parts of the UK dealt with their imperial legacy. In England, this often takes the form of a sort of romantic nostalgia for an era in which Britain civilised the world. In Scotland, though, it's often taken a different form, either in distancing ourselves from being involved, or more kind of insidiously admitting that we were involved, but saying that we're somehow less culpable than the English, either because we were unwilling participants, or that we were ourselves a victim of English colonialism.
Some people hate the English, I don't. They're just wankers. We, on the other hand, are colonised by wankers. Can't even find a decent culture to be colonised by.
So was Scotland colonised by the English? No. To be more substantive here, after the Act of Union, Scotland was integrated in the political structures of Britain and, as we've seen already, of empire. Scottish people held positions and power throughout the British political system, including at the very top and through the systems of British representative democracy. So there was significant Scottish political influence throughout the state. This isn't a feature of a subjugated colonised state. Adherents to the notion that Scotland was colonised by England will often point to the sidelining of Scots dialect and Gaelic in favour of standardised English.
Bonjour, you cheese-eating surrender monkeys!
The problem with this perspective is that it
Perfect.
views standard English as a foreign tongue to Scotland as a whole, which it wasn't. There were areas in Scotland where it was less common, but this was the same in England, where local dialects and languages were overtaken by standardised English throughout the period of industrialisation. Does this mean that England colonised itself since the 18th century? Well, maybe, but I think then we're breaking down the usefulness of colonialism as an analytic frame to understand the world. As Connell argues,
by obscuring a similar history of cultural incorporation within England itself, the suggestion that this process constitutes the English colonisation of Scotland performs a nationalist function by transforming the modernisation of Scotland from an endogenous process of development into an exogenous form of oppression.
Another argument I've seen come up here is the shite hand dealt to working class or agrarian Scots throughout the period of empire and industrialisation. I've seen people point to the Highland clearances in which Scottish landowners pushed off small croft farmers from their land in favour of like pastoral farming as a process of English colonialism, when it can be more effectively understood as a process of industrialisation.
Yeah, it's sort of like capitalist enclosure, right?
Development. The argument that Scotland was
I need to make a
colonised
video
by
about capitalist
England,
enclosure. It's
I don't
on
know,
my
often
list
leaves
to do
a bad
someday.
taste in my mouth. Because like even some of the worst off in Scotland, those dispossessed by the Highland clearances, would often emigrate to the colonies as part of the oppression of empire, whether that was in India or to become involved in chattel slavery in the Caribbean. And as we've seen, Scottish people were present throughout empire and benefited massively from it. So, I don't know, it seems a bit tasteless to try and draw an equivalence between the oppression of the proletariat or working class Scottish and the oppression of empire. Look, I know that's a bit of a moralistic argument, but I don't know, it's just my opinion, man. But that isn't to say that Scottish people aren't oppressed. They were and are oppressed by capitalism. But they weren't colonially oppressed. And importantly, this claim of English colonisation of Scotland shouldn't be used to minimise Scotland's active role within empire and the benefits that we still see from it today. By saying, oh, we were colonised too, you know, it seems to me like a way of minimising Scotland's role in and responsibility for colonialism and imperialism. This failure
So
to
that's not
truly
fascist
recognise
symbol.
the
I
ways in which
assume not.
empire
It just looks a little
built
bit like it.
Scotland's wealth within Britain and
little
put it
lightning bolts.
in the position it's in today isn't a form of imperial nostalgia, but can be more accurately described as cultural amnesia. That is, selectively forgetting certain dimensions of Scottish history in order to fit a more palatable national narrative.
Was America founded on slavery? One of the most uttered myths regarding the United States is that it was founded on slavery.
Oh,
America
yeah,
wasn't
forgot.
founded
It
on
was
slavery.
Ben Shapiro.
It was founded in spite of slavery. And we fought the bloodiest war in American history to end it.
But interestingly, there have been many attempts to try and redress this balance and properly grapple with Scotland's imperial history. And yet, the cultural amnesia persists. And why is this? Well, it's here that we can finally bring in the man with all the facts and many of the logics.
Oh my god.
Ben Shapiro himself.
I said certified freak. 7 days a week. Wet ass P-word. Make that
I
pull
gotta
out
work
game
some
week.
way into getting
Ben
this into
Shapiro
my
has a document
video.
on his website
Fucking
which he
Ben
describes
Shapiro
as
singing WAP is
Well, as I say in an article entitled, here's a list of all the giant, bad, dumb things I've ever said.
But while Benny Boy admits that these were bad things to say, he never addresses the underlying philosophies which drive him to say those things, and nor does he ever address that it's precisely the inflammatory, often racist language that these takes used that were so fundamental in building his popularity and wealth in the first place.
For example, you said
sure.
Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
But he can point to this list of bad things that he's said in the past as a way of like showing that he acknowledges his past failings and is trying to do better, while never really making any substantive reflection of why he took those positions in the first place, or indeed any steps to changing his behaviour. Can you see the parallels here? By acknowledging some responsibility for Scotland's role in empire, but distancing it from the worst aspects by doing things like saying we were colonised or we were forced into it. Scotland gets to do this Ben Shapiro deflection and simultaneously feel like we're addressing our dark past with imperialism, while failing to fully come to terms with our role in it and the ways in which we did and continue to benefit from it. In a way, it's similar to a phenomenon known as a public secret. That is, a process through which a fact is generally known, but about which there's a kind of culture of silence, or knowing what not to know. We know enough to know that Scotland was involved in empire, but also know enough not to know more. What's difficult about a public secret is that it's resistant to being revealed. That, in fact, being revealed is essential to its position as a secret. So when we talk about Scotland's role in imperialism as if it's a secret to be revealed, then we reinforce the idea that it's something that we should in fact be keeping secret. So academic papers revealing Scotland's true past can in a way reinforce the secrecy, which I guess is also true of this video. Ah, fuck!
Part 3. Who cares?
So Scotland was deeply involved in empire, and in many ways our national identity was forged and has its foundations in imperial Scotland.
What's interesting is that Quebecois people definitely do this too, actually. Because, like, one of the things that happened is that when the French colonized Quebec, they like the French were not as invested in colonization as the other European powers were, and so French colonies tended to be rather hands-off and rather like they were very low population, and they weren't not a lot of effort was put into them and stuff, and fairly often like Quebec nationalist retellings of the past will say, oh well, like the French Canadians lived perfectly fine with the local Iroquois people, and then the British took over in the 7 Years' War, and that's when things got bad, which is a grotesque oversimplification to make French Canadians seem like they're better, which is fucking bullshit, obviously.
But who cares? Why does it matter that we fully grapple with and fully acknowledge our history and the ways in which we were forged and benefit from imperialism? Firstly, in general, I think it's essential that all global north countries fully acknowledge and come to terms with the fact that imperialism was a massive process of stealing wealth and resources from the global south, and that they used that to industrialize the global north, and that this has profound implications for how we should seek to approach issues like global south debt or climate change. Again, these issues are more fully fleshed out in Jason Hickel's The Divide, and they deserve a whole video unto themselves. So here I want to really look at the connection between imperial cultural amnesia in Scotland and our political situation. There's a tendency in Scotland for us to view ourselves as more progressive or more left-wing than in England, and I think cultural amnesia and the way that we approach imperialism is part of that. The distancing of responsibility and the notion that Scotland was a victim of imperialism itself seems to create an idea that maybe we in Scotland are just...
How do you even begin to solve global north-south? Yeah, that's a good question. Some massive fucking reparations and definitely huge assistance to help them build up their economy is like a fucking start.
Maybe we're just naturally more progressive people than the English. You can see this in the writing of people like Michael Fry, who wrote in his book The Scottish Empire that unlike the English, the Scottish were traders, not raiders. And this attitude bleeds over into other areas of academic thought, with scholars like Graham MacDonald asserting in 2006 that
there's a prevalence of broadly leftist politics demonstrated by a majority of Scots for the last 30 years or so.
It's an idea that up here we're just somehow more progressive than there.
Oh man, that sentence sounds really fucking familiar as a Canadian.
The problem is it's simply not true. Scottish social attitudes are virtually indistinguishable from English ones, even in areas such as immigration. But what's worrying is that both Scottish and English social attitudes are moving rightwards. A lot of people will point to the unpopularity of the Conservative Party as evidence that Scotland is, more progressive than England. But whether people vote or don't vote for particular parties isn't a particularly reliable indicator of whether a country is a progressive or left-wing heartland. And this is particularly true because the main party in Scotland, the SNP, are definitely not a left-wing party. They are firmly a neoliberal one. I think the view that Scotland is just naturally more progressive than England, of which I think cultural amnesia regarding imperialism is part, is something that the left in Scotland needs to be very keenly aware of and not complacent about. I'm not taking a position in this video about whether or not Scotland should have independence, because this isn't a video on Scottish independence, and I don't have the strength to weather Scottish independence discourse right now. But I think there's a complacency on the left that should Scotland become independent, then we would immediately be able to do all these great leftist policies and we could transform Scotland into a progressive heartland. But with a firmly neoliberal party like the SNP being totally dominant in Scottish politics, and with Scottish social attitudes being so similar to English ones, I don't think that's a conclusion that we can take for granted at all. The Scottish left will need to be prepared to fight just as hard in an independent Scotland as they would as part of the UK, which involves advocating the rectifying of imperial crimes and the destruction of power systems which maintain the exploitation of the global south by the global north.
Well, that was pretty good. Well done, John.
Well, thanks for watching.
Alrighty, that's by John the Duncan. So if you want to go and get a subscription, go and get in on that. I'm gonna take a quick break to go to the washroom again, and then we'll be back and we'll get the back 20 minutes going. So hang tight, everybody. Alrighty, I am back, everybody. Hello, hello. Hope everybody had a really good time. Now, we're gonna watch the next video, in which I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna have to hedge so many words. So this is a video: is alternate history hub culturally biased? From Nothing. So let's see. See what we got. Let's watch this.
Hello everybody, it's Jabari here. I know it's not normal for me to make videos.
Oh shoot, I haven't done the thing. Here we go. Sorry about that.
Like these where I react to other videos or call out other YouTubers, but I just couldn't bite my tongue anymore with this one. I feel like videos like these are what perpetuate the negative views of Africans and their history. And I also know that these videos are very old videos, and not to mention they're alternate history videos. So, you know, an alternate history video is exactly what it says. It's an alternate history video. So obviously things aren't going to be 100% accurate or true. I fully acknowledge that fact. However, I feel like there are some extremely huge cultural biases in these videos, and I'm surprised nobody else has noticed this yet. Nobody has made a video about this before, so I guess it's up to me to do it. I'm going to be comparing two videos posted by Alternate History Hub. What if the Americas were never colonized, and what if Africa was never colonized? As you may be able to tell, this video is unscripted. It's just something I really want to just put out there. So let's just start off simple, and I'll show you the introductions of both videos.
What if the scramble for Africa never happened? What was this? The scramble for Africa was the rapid colonization and split of African land by the European powers. What if this rush of colonization never happened? What would the continent be like?
Man, this is a super old alternate history hub video.
What if Europeans never colonized America? What if the colonies which Europe did place failed, and Europe gave up ever expanding into the New World?
Pretty simple and straightforward, right? I mean, the intentions just seem like the intentions of any alternate history video, just something really fun and interesting to think about. Cool. I saw the video, I thought it sounded interesting, so I clicked it, just like most other people do. But when you compare the two videos, things start to get a little strange.
If you went into this video asking, would Africa be like Europe and Asia, the answer is no. Even with enough trade and exchange of ideas, most sub-Saharan African people were not technologically advanced enough to compete with Europe and East Asia.
Fair enough, sub-Saharan African countries were indeed more primitive than Eurasian nations during the time, but to say that they would have remained that way even after trade and exchange is a bit of a
Yeah, this is like a part where I heavily disagree with Cody on a lot of things. Because, like, he definitely has this a lot more of this kind of, like, this is sort of the kind of thinking that results of, like, guns, germs, and steel. This is the kind of bullshit that comes out of guns, germs, and steel type thinking. Because, like, yeah, first of all, just defining cultural quote-unquote progress linearly like that is, first of all, full of problems. But, like, the other thing about this is just that, like, the whole, like, you know, Jared Diamond idea that, oh yeah, well, because of geography, Africa was just always destined to be backwards. It's like, fuck that.
Stretch, in my opinion. But, I mean, it's his opinion in his scenario, so cool. Now let's see what he thinks about the Native Americans.
Eventually, trade with East Asia and Europe would introduce new technologies and animals into the continent. And
it's also weird to me because YouTube didn't come out until I was already an adult, and so the idea of people being kids on YouTube is weird to me.
Tribes would quickly grow into nations.
So this is where I start to get confused. They say that Native Americans would quickly adopt Eurasian technology and build states and huge cities and civilizations, despite the fact that the majority of...
They already had... Like, the fact that, like, they're like, oh, this would eventually happen. Like, it was already happening. Tenochtitlan already existed.
them were hunter-gatherers or agrarian farmers, with a few exceptions such as the Mesoamericans and the Inca. The overwhelming majority of Africans, on the other hand, were farmers. They all had cattle, they had horses in the western and northern parts of Africa, and all of them used iron and steel weapons for thousands of years. And there were literally hundreds of kingdoms all throughout Africa, all throughout its history. So why would the Africans who were more technologically advanced...
Yeah, I'm kind of like wondering, like, oh yeah, so when, like, fucking, like, the Empire of Mali was, like, way advanced compared to Europe, how come that doesn't become, like, the destiny that comes up? Like, yeah, like, ugh.
...advanced and had more old world resources such as horses and cattle remain primitive, but the Native Americans become advanced.
In this alternate timeline, Africa's relationship to the world would be complex and odd. Spurred by Europe's trade, kingdoms would be across the coast waging war against one another.
So Africa's relationship with the world would be really weird, and the only thing that would really happen is exchange in firearms, which Africans would use to conquer areas within the continent. Alright, I could see that. I mean, introducing technology like firearms can definitely lead to some wars and people vying for power with their newly acquired military technology. I mean, it's happened before, and I'm sure it would happen in this alternate history too. So surely the situation should be similar for Native Americans, right?
The tribes on the coast would be in contact with trading foreigners, and soon massive cities would grow on the Atlantic and Pacific coast. The coastal people grow rich, trading resources such as corn with the Old World. The Europeans would trade with the Eastern tribes, and the Chinese would trade with the Western tribes.
So again, I'm confused. Africa's relationship with the world would be really weird, and they'd basically just shoot each other to death with European guns, whereas Native Americans' relationship would be perfectly normal, and they'd grow and become wealthy and have thriving cities.
Now, about Africa on the global scale. Even if kingdoms did conquer throughout the continent,
they did have access to iron. I think the main thing is that is the development of forges. Like, I think a lot of the gold, because gold can be melted very easily, but, like, to make iron and pig iron and steel and stuff like that requires, like, bellows and like some powerful forges to make weapons of the kind you're thinking of.
Sub-Saharan Africa would certainly remain very tribal, with very little political entities in the center of the continent, an oddity in a world made up of nation-states. The kingdoms would be across the coast waging war against one another. In Central Africa, there would hardly be any political entity. Order would be maintained by the various villages who would remain undeveloped. In this alternate time,
which was a thing that people in Sub-Saharan Africa did have access to.
Sub-Saharan Africa would have works of art and culture, but technologically and economically would always be behind.
Yep, there it is again. They're going to remain primitive, even though there actually were kingdoms and states in Sub-Saharan Africa and in Central Africa before and after European arrival. But yeah, anyway, if you think that they would have remained primitive, then again, surely Native Americans would have been primitive as well, right?
With the Old World, the Europeans would trade with the Eastern tribes and the Chinese would trade with the Western tribes. This is basically the Columbian exchange without the disease and devastation. America would be split into many numerous cultures and languages, as well as unique religions which different people follow.
So, the center of Africa would have nothing but tribes and small villages, but Native Americans would have nations all throughout both continents.
Much of Africa didn't have the education, infrastructure, or national identity fit for European-style nations, and fell into chaos.
It wasn't because of education or cultural identity, it was because of something that was already put out in this video.
Very much oversimplified, after decades of European colonialism and 2 world wars, nationalist movements rose up and Africans slowly gained independence. However, the borders they were left with were clunky and odd since they were drawn without concern.
Yeah, another good point. Those tech advancements came from getting rich off stealing resources from the Americas and from Africa, so yeah. If the Chinese were interested in trading with Native Americans, wouldn't they have done it in our timeline? I mean, the West Coast wasn't colonized until the 18th century. Yeah, what's it called? There was no reason to think that there was anything of interest to get up there in that direction for a long time. China's like, if China was going to have any sort of like trade mission ambitions, it was to get more involved in the Indian Ocean trade, because that was definitely more of a thing they knew about and were interested in.
For native demographics.
So let's just ignore the fact that he contradicted his own point, and let's just say hypothetically it was true, and it was the lack of cultural identity and education that led to the downfall of African nations. And let's just say, you know, if that were true, surely the Stone Age hunter-gatherers of North America would suffer the same fate, right?
Empires and nations would rise and fall across America, just as they did in Europe and Asia. Eventually forming into nation-states and interacting with each other today, the Native American people would never be simply lumped into one group, but would be differentiated between ethnicity, tribe, and eventually nation. These native nations would compete in international politics and wars, perhaps even in a world war.
Of course not. They'd clearly become powerful enough to actually compete with European and Asian nations in world wars after formerly being hunter-gatherer Stone Age peoples, but Africans? Nah, of course not.
Today, people in the United States have a common misconception of Native Americans being one united group. This is far from the truth. It would be the same as associating everyone in Europe as the same, even though we have Germans, French, and Italians, all with a complicated and difficult history. This is the same with Native America. If Europeans never colonized and invaded America, the native nations and tribes would continue to interact and trade.
I completely agree 100%. I mean, people do the same thing with Africans too. They just refer to Africans as Africans. They don't acknowledge the 54 countries that exist on the continent, nor do they really factor in the thousands of languages and ethnic groups that exist within these 54 countries.
Yep. The negatives is the mass violence itself. Europe would give modern weapons to native kings. We saw this terrible violence happen with Africans capturing Africans, Africans capturing Africans capturing Africans capturing Africans for the slave.
That is not. Oh, okay.
Trade in the Americas with the natives. It would happen at a much larger scale in Africa with modern equipment supplied.
Throughout the video with the Native Americans, he stresses constantly the importance of distinguishing the several different unique peoples and cultures of the Americas, but he continuously lumps all Africans together in his African video. Like, rather than distinguishing enemy nations and their rivals, he just says Africans capturing Africans. If it were Europeans, as he so generously added in his Native American version of this video, they would have clearly distinguished between French capturing Germans or Spanish capturing Polish, or so on. You would never hear them say Europeans capturing Europeans. Even his little silly characters are all unique in appearance compared to one another. The European ones, the Arabic ones, the Native Americans all throughout his video have unique appearances, but the African ones are all just various shades of brown. Despite the fact that Africa quite literally has over 1,000 different languages and ethnic groups and 54 different countries. Lastly, one thing that I just absolutely cringed on was how he constantly said European and East Asian. Like, where does East Asia come in?
The Europeans would trade with the Eastern tribes, and the Chinese would trade with the Western tribes.
We're not technologically advanced enough to compete with Europe and East Asia.
Eventually trade with East Asia and Europe.
The greatest East Asian explorers were the fleets of Zheng He in China. Arabs were much better explorers, exploring farther and wider lands than East Asians ever did. Even Swahili people of East Africa were great explorers. They've been sailing the Indian Ocean trading with the Chinese, Indians, and Arabs for over 1,000 years. So at the very least, it confuses me as to why he didn't mention the Arabic or Islamic trade routes, because they were just as advanced, if not more advanced, than Europeans at the time, and much better explorers. But for some reason, he just continued to mention Europeans and East Asians. So guys, in conclusion, I really like alternate history videos, and I really like this channel, Alternate History Hub's videos. And if these two videos were posted on different channels, you know, completely different opinions, then I probably wouldn't be as bothered about it. But it's the same channel and it's the same channel, so it should be consistent. But instead, they're literally comparing, you know, Iron Age peoples who have horses, cattle, agriculture, and connections to Europe and Asia. They're comparing them to completely isolated people who are using stone tools and were largely hunter-gatherers. They're comparing those two and then saying the latter would be...
Yeah, it's true. Someone pointed out that, like, if there hadn't been European colonization, most likely the people who would have visited the Americas that weren't Europeans would have been Polynesian people.
Rich and successful and build nations, while the former would just fall into a state of chaos and brutally murder each other and not really progress anywhere technologically. And on top of that, I doubt they even acknowledge what they were doing, hence how they continuously kept tossing Africans in this box of tribal people, primitive people, all the while completely ignoring the fact that Europeans found several centralized kingdoms all around Africa. Anyway guys, like I said, this isn't my usual style of video. If you enjoyed it, let me know and I will make more of these. If not, then I will never make a video like this again. Also,
it's good stuff. There's definitely a point that needed to be made. Alright, next we've got Thug Edwardian Lady. Oh boy, let's see what this is.
Snoop Dogg!
I'm guessing it says don't cross or something.
Wait. Yes.
Alrighty. That was fun. How much time we got left? We got 3 minutes. We have time for one more video. We got this one. Michael Grove visited his Mysteries Boudoir. Okay.
So you're back, you disgusting worm. Just remember, no photographs, no touching, no mentioning Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
No, mistress.
So, what repulsive kink do you want today?
Well, I'd like... Oh, it's so nasty. I'd like unpopular conservative opinions only you can get away with.
Ask and you shall receive, Tory boy. We must limit all immigration. except for Israelis.
Oh, you can say it because you're Asian.
If single
Oh,
mothers
dude.
can't afford babies, they should have abortions. If they want abortions, they shouldn't have had sex.
Yes, you can say it because you're a woman. Although it would be nice if it made sense.
People should only qualify for universal credit if they don't need universal credit.
Oh,
Why do
boy.
young people love Rocket? It's just smelly leaves. Black Panther is a terrible movie.
Yes, we think it, you say
This
it.
is-
Oh, I'm close.
oh my
Are you
goodness.
pleasuring yourself, Filth?
No, I'm close to figuring out how to chop up the NHS and sell it in little pieces. And therefore,
I have never
also
seen this
close to
YouTube channel
orgasm.
before. This is
Sell
weird.
poppers in corner shops. Trans women are ducks. Eggs are delicious on pizza.
That's not conservative.
Enact mandatory Morris dancing.
That's too conservative. Stop, stop!
Had enough slime.
Yes.
Right, now you do me.
Year on year, fiscal returns have outpaced projections by an annual adjusted rate of 4%.
Oh God, I love dull men.
Okie dokie. Well, that was fun. Is this South Park but British and puppets? It looks like it. Okay, it's a reboot of a sketch show from the 80s. Interesting. Okay. Well, that was the thing. Alrighty, Phoebe's like pacing right now at the table because she wants food. Alright, I'm gonna feed the cat, so I'm gonna go find someone to raid, I think, and then we're gonna have ourselves a nice weekend. So thank you all for coming out. Make sure that who's alive. Let's let's go raid Izzy again. It's Bear 713, and you know, have a nice weekend, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other. Show love, etc. Bye.